of them occurring right here in Ohio, Nationwide Children's Hospital and Cincinnati Children's on September 1st. We are actually launching and expanding our program services to include family assistance. Those include programs to help families access approved drugs, whether their commercial insurance policies or Medicaid has refused to pay for these approved drugs. We provide equipment assistance to families who, anybody that's ever, I hope you haven't had to buy a power chair, but they can be between $20,000 and $40,000. If your insurance doesn't cover that, that's a very big expense. We also help families travel to get to expert care centers. There's not, it's a rare disease. There's not too many experts across the country. And traveling to clinical trials to try to get your kid into clinical trial can be very expensive. So we help out with that. We also advocated for the approval of the first ever approved drug with the FDA, which was approved September of 2016. We testified in support of the Ohio Right to Try bill, granting patients with terminal illnesses access to experimental treatments, which was signed into law by Governor Kasich on January 4th of this year. And that's also now a federal law, federal right to try. We've also served on several pharmaceutical advisory boards that are developing drugs for Duchenne. So we do 2 annual fundraisers per year. We do a 5-10K, which Dr. Shaw was, this was the first year that they signed on to sponsor us on that. We held it May 13th at Glacier Ridge. I would like to ask the City of Dublin's help in looking for a new venue, because fortunately for us, we keep growing out of our venues, and we had 600 runners last year, which was doubled the previous year from 300 runners. So even though it's a wonderful park, it's just not big. We outgrew it the first year we had it there. So we also do a golf classic at the Sayre Reserve Country Club on October 2nd. Last year was the first year we held this event. We actually filled 2 golf courses, 200 golfers. We raised $65,000 with our inaugural event. We are going to do it again this year. Our focus will continue to be to fund treatments to treat all boys with Duchenne, regardless of mutation, through advocacy, awareness, and family assistance, and to leave this disease space better than when it found all of us. So I believe Nancy has a video, one of our videos. These are 3 of the, well, probably the cutest boys you'll ever meet, but I'll let you be the judge on it. So, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Big toys.
What's your favorite toys?
Mickey.
Mickey Mouse? So, what do you want to be when you grow up?
A football player.
What position do you want to play?
Kicker.
When you grow up?
A cop.
Why do you want to be a cop?
Because they hold guns.
I like to talk to him about his future because it gives me hope that he has a future. But I'm just not sure where his passion is going to be once he realizes that being a kicker isn't going to be possible for him. His Duchenne progression is moving faster than medical technology can move. And I think about the fact that he's never going to see a football field. And he's never going to be able to kick a ball. He's never going to be able to go out there and play with his friends. It breaks my heart.
So for us, answering the question about what Alex's future looks like is actually a tough one. We actually don't talk about the future a lot, and we do that on purpose because we don't know what our future is going to be. We still know that there's a long way to go, but what we know now is that we can celebrate the moments. So we don't really talk about the future in our family. We talk about what are we doing today, what are we doing tomorrow, what do you want to do this week? And that's really been our focus throughout our journey so far.
I dread the day that he Googles Duchenne muscular dystrophy and realizes what his future has in store for him.
So for me, his future depends on us working really, really hard to make sure these therapies are moving quickly. Honestly, what I want for him is just to have a chance to grow up.
I made the field goal. I won.
Yes, you did. Time go, baby.
I constantly think about what, when I was 25, and that's just not enough. There's no way that that's a fair life expectancy.
It's going to be a reality for him. When he realizes how much Duchenne is going to take away from him.
I want to mention about that video, Alex is on the medication that was just approved that we're fighting for access for all families. He's actually improving, and that has never happened to our boys before. So there are opportunities right in front of us to change the outcome for these boys, to help them grow up. Funding treatments for Duchenne is a heavy lift. It requires millions and millions of dollars for each one of these clinical trials. Our success requires an all-hands-on-deck effort. Corporate sponsors like our friends at Premier Allergy, community partners like the City of Dublin are critical to our success. Thank you for having us here today.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And I do have a proclamation that I would like to read, and it's impossible for any words that I say to match the message that you just delivered. Just know that this community will be supportive of you. And I know that you've touched everybody up here. And I'm pretty sure, Chief, we'll probably be able to make that kid a deputy Dublin police officer. I'm sure the chief will take care of it.
Don't ever tell him that, because
Well, we're not only going to tell him, we're going to make it.
Okay, I'm just warning
We're not only going
If
to,
he gets wind of it, he'll be calling you.
we will get wind of it because one of us will call him and invite him in to make sure that it happens.
Thank you.
So Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is the most common fatal genetic disorder diagnosed in childhood, affecting approximately 1 in every 5,000 live male births each year. And whereas Duchenne is caused by a gene mutation and results in progressive muscular degeneration and weakness, leading to the serious medical problems particularly related to the heart and lungs. And although there are no medical treatments that may help slow progression, there is currently no cure for Duchenne. Kelly Maynard founded Little Hercules Foundation on January the 1st of 2013 after her youngest son Jackson was diagnosed at the age of 5. And whereas Kelly decided to leave her career and invest her time and energy towards this disease, and now serves on pharmaceutical advisory boards, advocates with regulatory agencies regarding drug approvals, develops critical partnerships within the community, and testifies for legislation that directly impacts families and patients living with all rare diseases. And whereas the Little Hercules Foundation focuses on improving the lives of those diagnosed with Duchenne Muscular Foundation through 4 main pillars: advocacy, awareness, family assistance, and research funding. And whereas Premier Allergy, which is headquartered in Dublin, Ohio, and founded by Dr. Sumit Shah, has partnered with the Little Hercules Foundation to sponsor the Duchenne Dash, the 5K, 10K walk run, which took place on May 13th at Glacier Ridge Metro Park, to raise awareness and funds for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And whereas Duchenne Dash proceeds help fund further research and clinical trials to create more treatment options and ultimately to find a cure for all of those affected by this disease. Now therefore I, Gregory S. Peterson, Mayor of the City of Dublin, on behalf of all of Dublin City Council, do hereby proclaim Thursday, September the 7th, 2017 as World Duchenne's Awareness Day in the City of Dublin, and encourage all residents to increase their understanding and awareness of the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Signed this 28th day of August, 2017.
Kelly, I've never met you personally before, or Jackson, but I've heard a lot about both of you from your husband, who I used to work with in the Attorney General's office, and you're both amazing. So
Thank you
I
so
can't
much.
believe
And
what
this
you've
is just
accomplished.
proof. I tell people all the time, everyone knows my husband. There you go.
There you go.
He's the nicest, friendliest guy in the world. And see, it happened at City Council meeting.
Well, every once in a while, Kelly, somebody will come into this chamber and remind us of something that helps us keep all of this in perspective. And that's precisely what it did. And Dr. Shaw, Dr. Shaw supports the Irish Festival and the 4th of July and his employees and his patients. And he is a pillar in our community. And thank you, Dr. Shaw, for your support of this really important
And it is
cause.
truly critical to what we do.
Yep,
Thank you.
they're fantastic. Thank you very much, Kelly. Thanks for coming in. Hunger Awareness Month is Molly Arbogast here. There she is. Hi, Molly. Come on forward. How are you? So tell us
great.
about Hunger Awareness Month.
Absolutely. So September is Hunger Awareness Month. Also, Hunger Action Month this year is what they're calling it. So as far as it's going above just making people aware of hunger as an issue, but also helping to promote throughout the month what people can do to help reduce hunger in the community and across the country. So for us, we like to think of it more as food insecurity versus hunger. So food insecurity is defined as a lack of consistent access to affordable and healthy food. So it's more than just getting people a box of mac and cheese. It's helping them make sure that they know where their next meals are coming, that they have consistent access to food, because that inconsistency has been proven to lead to decreased performance both in schools and jobs. It also contributes to mental health issues, which again can contribute to school and job performance. It also is really important to have that access to healthy foods to be able to reduce healthcare expenses and keep people healthy in the long term. So aside from just the non-perishable foods that we typically think of with food pantries, we work really hard to make sure that we have produce and bread and frozen meats, and we're able to do that because of our amazing retail partnerships, all of the wonderful community gardens from the different community groups and businesses in Dublin that contribute to us throughout the entire growing season, and then also our ability to get monetary donations, which we then can use to purchase additional produce and things as needed to make sure that everyone who comes through our doors is going home with an abundance of food that is healthy, good for them, and things that they'll be able to use. So some of what we did over the last year, in 2016, we had an average of 248 households per month in the pantry, which was a 10% increase over 2015. We served more than 8,800 individuals with more than 132,000 meals. 38% of those were children and 21% were seniors, which has been our largest growing population rate here in Dublin over the last year. We also are really excited to announce our Irish Festival totals. So the Sunday of Irish Festival from 9:30 to 11, people are able to come for free if they bring food donations for the pantry. We brought in, with the community's help obviously, 16,772 pounds of food, which my fun way to think about it, since that was in a 90-minute span, that's 186 pounds a minute of food that was brought in. So we had over 200 volunteers that day between on-site at the Irish Festival that got everything back to the pantry, and then we had another 100 that sorted, organized, date-checked, labeled, and moved everything into our warehouse space for it so that it was all completely organized and ready for us to use same day, which is an incredible endeavor. So we just want to thank the community as always. We have volunteer opportunities on our website. We also publish weekly our most needed items list. So if you're ever not sure what to bring in, that gets updated based on our inventory so that we're able to keep consistent items in the pantry. And again, thank you to the community support, all of our volunteers, all of the organizations that help us do what we do every day.
Thank you, Molly. You've been there for a couple years now?
Yeah, almost 2.
After 2 years? And if somebody wants to donate, what's the best thing to do? Go to the website and find out what you're looking for and then bring it?
Yep, absolutely.
What's the website?
It's dublinfoodpantry.org. And we also have an online donation link, so monetary donations are always great as well, because again, those allow us to purchase anything that we have gaps, but we do have the most needed items list too.
I've got a question on the monetary side. I know they did collections at the Irish Festival during the church services, and did you get any numbers back on how much
We are
revenue
still
you
waiting
received?
on the final, there are a couple still outstanding, but I know that we are over $8,000 for donations for those, the services that were collected that Sunday at Irish Festival as well, which is just overwhelming and amazing.
$8,000 just from that one day of service?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really incredible endeavor, and we're really, really honored that the city and the Irish Festival do that for us every year.
Yeah, it's for passing the basket.
And if you need help, what's the best way to contact you guys?
Also, DublinFoodPantry.org has all of the requirements, everything you need to bring, which is a pretty easy process. It's your ID, and you need to live in the city of Dublin or Dublin School District. But we also do have our phone number, which is 614-889-6590. And we're a walk-in choice pantry, so there are very few hurdles to service.
And did you get those nice automatic doors installed?
We
So you don't
did,
have to
yes,
do
they're
things? There you go.
fabulous. So they make it a lot easier to bring food in and get our clients in and out as well.
It was really great of the historic district and all that to look at it and make sure that you guys were able to get them.
Yeah, that was an incredible benefit to us as well.
Anything else from anybody, council? Thank you, Molly, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom McDonald. Mr. McDonald, come on up. This is kind of fun. So the Dublin City School District was ranked number what? Tell us about this ranking.
Well, we are in the top 5, and we're proud. It's a great award because a lot of times you look at data results. And I want to invite Mr. Andres. Chris Andres is our Director of
Please.
Student Services. I'm the Director of Student Operations, and we're honored because of the relationship that we have with a great community. So I want to let Mr. Andres say a few words.
And I just want to make sure, this was ranked 5 in the nation.
In the nation, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go.
So the website, they help people discover, it says, the schools and neighborhoods that are right for you. So they're looking at places all over the country. And so I think, on behalf of Dr. Hoadley and the board, who are having their own board meeting tonight, we wanted to say thanks for allowing us to come here tonight. Recognitions like this show the strong partnership between the community, between the city, the community, the parents, the students, and we strive to provide a world-class education and continuously improve in everything that we do. And this shows that a lot of the work that we do, it pays off. People are looking. So the criteria for this focuses strongly or a lot on academic performance, student and parent satisfaction surveys on the way that they feel about their community and about the way they feel about their schools. And one thing that we were really pleased with is it celebrates the diversity that we have within our city and within our community and within our school district. So looking at the different criteria, we were just so pleased to be number 5 on that list in the country.
It's fantastic, and I do have a proclamation I want to read to you real quick. Whereas Dublin City Schools have long been a point of pride in our community and a major attraction element for the residents and businesses alike, and whereas Dublin schools are frequently mentioned among the best in the state and in the country, and whereas Niche.com recently named Dublin City Schools the 5th best school district in the United States of America, and whereas the 2018 Best School Districts ranking is based on a rigorous analysis of key statistics and millions of reviews from students and parents using data from the U.S. Department of Education, and whereas ranking factors included state test scores, college readiness, graduation rates, SAT, ACT scores, teacher quality, public school district ratings, and more, and whereas more than 90% of the Dublin City School students go on to higher education, attending some of the finest colleges and universities in the country, and whereas last year the district had 46 National Merit Scholars semifinalists, which is more than any school district in the state of Ohio, and whereas all 3 Dublin City high schools were ranked in the top 35 in Ohio out of more than 800 statewide, and whereas according to the results of a recent survey, more than 70% of the class of 2010 reported graduating from a 4-year college, which is twice the completion rate on the national average. And whereas Dublin City Schools prides itself on educating the world child with a focus on providing world-class introduction, well-rounded experiences, and continuous improvement in everything that they do. Now, therefore, I, Gregory S. Peterson, Mayor of the City of Dublin, on behalf of all of Dublin City Council, do hereby congratulate Dublin City Schools, the Board of Education, and Superintendent Todd Hoadley on this outstanding and well-deserved recognition. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
for all the students who are here, this is for you.
And Dana, every time we go to any kind of corporate thing, it is always, what are your schools like? What are your schools like? What are your schools like? That is what drives this community. So thank you very much for everything that you do. Okay, citizen comments. I'm just going in the order in which they signed in. Stephen Christensen? Huh? Sen. Sven.
It's Sven Christensen.
Sven.
I live at 5765 Settlers Place.
Welcome.
Thank you. Clay, who is my very nice neighbor, is passing out some documents for your review. I think you received these in email this morning. We did. And, but that's not much time to read it with all the other paperwork, so we figured we'd bring you a copy here today.
Sure, thank you. It's all yours.
So, first of all, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, City Council, and certainly Mayor McDaniel. We are number 5 for a reason, and it's because of your good leadership and the good stewardship and management of the city, and we're grateful to be here. We love it. To take time out of a busy schedule to come in and speak to you is because we care. I think you know that from all the people that come here and meet with you. And so tonight, when we talk about Llewellyn Farms and Waterford Village, they were developed about the same time as Muirfield Village. Some of the same developers that Jack used up there are used in our neighborhoods. There's the winding paths all around over the Cosgray and Kramer Creek, and it's a beautiful place to live. So our neighbors have had existing commercial zoning right around us today. It's been primarily one-story professional development, and it's kind of tucked away, operates 9 to 5, little noise, light interference with our pleasant scenic environment. The building setbacks are a little close, and the dumpsters are probably misplaced, but we've learned to live with it. It's an acceptable place. There's even been developers' requests in past years from Crawford Hoeing, NRI, and Spectrum that would have negatively impacted our neighborhoods, but many of you around the table have stood with us, helped us out, said, hey, this is probably better placed here in our city. This place is protected residential, and that's why we're here today, is to do the same thing, hopefully have a renewed neighborhood priority. So what are the tools we've had in the past as the zoning guidelines? It's why the pending corporate development plan is really disturbing, because essentially it removes the zoning protections that we can use today, and it basically replaces it with almost an anything goes direction. During the open forum presentation sessions that the city has hosted, the lead consultant we hired implied that later on down the road would be where we would address zoning concerns. However, as we've learned more about the process, the Dublin Corporate Area Plan is really the vision. The Corporate Area Plan guides and directs the Zoning Commission, and ultimately you, the City Council, will use it for decisions. So, as we understand it, if we don't have protections added now, then our residential neighborhoods east of France Road, during the review period, if we don't get this fixed, we're really in trouble. And so that, again, is why we're here tonight. On the positive side, if this effort is successful to protect our neighborhood character up front, it should save us all hours of fighting over developer requests and zoning details in the future. So this is hopefully proactive. You guys are busy, we're busy. Let's get it right up front. A residential overlay zone or a sub-district with respectful zoning guidance is the common sense approach that we've seen, but we're open to any approach that can assure our constituents that they are an important priority. When writing the prudent planning petition with our neighbors and leaders, it was clear that our requests are squarely in line with the DNA of our city. We are optimistic that you can help us structure a favorable plan, and again, that's why we're here and asking for your support. We view this situation as a first draft miss by the consultant team. This project covers 1.5 square miles, and our concern is probably less than 5% of the whole area. However, for the nearby residents, you can expect, you're expected us to use all the new development nearby and the office development nearby. The number 5% is probably 100% value for us. It's the one we're most concerned about. We certainly understand the overall goal and the importance of this economic development project. We are taxpayers. We crave the same innovative employers that you want. We're excited for the urban option in Bridge Street. We certainly don't have any objection to similar upgrading the Metro Place and the business parks and the new services across the street. But east of France is a different area. It abuts the residential. In the pending all free-for-all zoning environment, it is reasonable to think that someone could tear down an older one-story office building that exists today in Llewellyn Farms along our path and build a multi-story hotel. It's a good location. but it would change the dynamic of where we live today. The water for village residents would also eventually have something built in their cornfields behind them, the real cornfields. Let's plan now using that green space and the build distance tools to give them better privacy and to make it special. This is Dublin, where what's next should enhance, not detract from our quality of life. So we're requesting a true collaborative effort with planning and with the City of Dublin and the council on the 5% hotspot area. The bright and talented development team, side by side with the residents who know their neighborhoods best, can develop a winning plan that we can all support. Thank you again for serving us as you do and for taking the time to meet with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Sven. There were a couple of other people that signed in, I think, on this specific issue. Why don't we hear them out, and then we'll address it over here? Okay. Clay Daney? Oh, Clay, you're the one that just passed out this stuff, weren't you? Okay. That's coming off your time.
City Council, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and speak. We'll keep it kind of short and sweet. So I'm Clay Daney. I live at 5775 Settlers Place, right next door to Sven, in Llewellyn Farms. And my wife and I moved to Dublin about 4 years ago after previously living in the short north. I moved to Dublin, and we moved to Dublin because it was an area that was regarded as kind of the preeminent place for planned development. I'm a big proponent of development personally, and the city had good schools and access to amenities. More specifically, Llewellyn Farms, where I live, we chose that area because it had access to what we enjoyed most. Downtown Dublin, the river, the emerging Bridge Street district, which I'm a huge fan of. And when we moved in, we also knew that we were going to be having next door neighbors that were businesses. And at the time, we were absolutely okay with that because they were typically modest one-story businesses that would be maybe a law firm or an accounting firm or something like that. But as Sven mentioned, the rule change with the change in zoning does bring about certain uncertainties for the residents that I think has caused some unrest. We have full faith in the planning team and the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council that you'll hear our concerns and that these will be reflected. But we haven't seen that in the Dublin corporate area plan yet. Where one-story buildings exist today, there could be hotels, restaurants, bars, multifamily residential units kind of in our backyard. So as Sven kind of mentioned, 95% of the corporate area plan I think is great. The remaining 5% I think is really causing heartache for us. The areas east of France Road, all we're asking for are a couple of accommodations, most specifically site use limitations. So what types of businesses are going to be our next door neighbors? What type of height restrictions will there be? How tall are the buildings going to be? What are the setback restrictions? How far away will they be from our property lines? And then green space and landscape buffering. I don't know anybody in Dublin that's not in favor of more trees, so we figured we'd include that as well. We've gathered a petition. Within 48 hours, we've got over 200 signatures. I think when we last checked, it was at about 250 signatures, which I think reflects the fact that neighbors were concerned. The Dublin corporate area plan, I see the need for it. I think it's a fantastic plan. I just think we need to get the remaining 5% right. That's east of France Road. So if we can do that, I think we're going to have something that businesses and residents are very excited about. I want to thank the Planning Commission for being so open to the feedback that we've given them over the past year. It's been a very collaborative effort, and I really think that we're going to find a middle ground here, and I'm excited for it. Very excited to have access to the amenities of the corporate area plan. So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for the time. Really appreciate it. Planning Commission, thank you for everything. You all have taught us that we should expect nothing less than the best development in Dublin. So that's our blessing and your curse. So thank you for that. But let's do it again with this corporate area plan, and we trust that you will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clay. Yep. Eric Kreidler?
Yes. So my name is Eric Kreidler. I live at 5815 Settlers Place, Dublin, Ohio, the 17. I'm here to obviously to continue our discussion about the Dublin corporate area plan. And one of the things that I want to mention is I grew up in Dublin. I actually graduated 1 year before council member Grooms. I don't know if you remember me or anything like that. So I've been a witness to the explosive growth of Dublin. And you know what? Development and growth is a good thing. It's a good thing in that we have to, we have to grow as a community, we have to develop as a community. The problem is when that growth and development infringes on the quality of life for the neighborhoods and the citizens that are near that growth. Now, I sat down and I had lived away from Dublin for a while. My family moved back, and I said, why did we move back? Well, I wrote this down. The appeal of Dublin is its quality of life, its strong neighborhoods, and responsible governance concerning factors that influence those who live there first and those who work there second. I want you to remember that. That's what I remember growing up in Dublin. So ultimately, this is the reason why I, my family, and many of my neighbors are here. We want to make sure that this is done correctly. Now for why I'm really here. The primary issue I have with this plan is the validity of the input results from the various public input meetings. These meetings were designed to direct the consultant team as to what employers, employees, and citizens of the area want in the area. I think it's pertinent to point out that one of my primary responsibilities as a principal research scientist with Honda is the analysis of research conclusions based on the statistical data that is presented to support those conclusions. I have seen really poor outcomes from decisions made using poor data and poor data analysis. I want to make sure that we don't do that here. So let's look at what the draft report says concerning the attributes residents, employers, and employees are seeking in the areas as what they would like. So I read the report. Phase 1 meeting, as indicated in the report, was conducted with business, property owners, and brokers. No indication was provided as to how many were present, in what proportion, and what affiliations or conflicts of interest that potentially exist with these people. I cannot argue that, yeah, we'd be nice to have more local restaurants. We're not against development. Yeah, it would definitely be nice to have more local restaurants, a much more progressive feel in the neighborhood. And I can't argue that parking conditions are less than desirable and surround some of these businesses. But the extent that we need to address these is not clear. The Phase 2 meetings are a bit more problematic in which that apparently many of the analyses that were performed were basically practically meaningless, statistically speaking. So if you count the number of respondents from both meetings, the total number is 198 participants. Of those numbers, 144 claim to be Dublin residents. If we assume the Dublin residents only attended one of the meetings, meaning they did not double up, this only represents 0.3% of the population of Dublin. That's a statistically small number to base what we desire in this area. This, coupled with the polling methodology, the questions asked, and the lack of statistical analysis is highly problematic. For instance, in the public input review slides, the second slide presents pie graphs showing residency of respondents, including a undefined next to study area group, and the work location of respondents without giving the number polled or the actual percentage breakdown. I presented this to a colleague of mine, a PhD chemist who also lives in Dublin. He looked at it and said, this is absolutely meaningless. The reason being is you don't know the numbers, you don't know the percentages. How would your opinion change if you knew these numbers? Was it a sample size of 10 or was it a sample size of 10,000? Your view changes dramatically based upon the number of people polled. Also, how did they verify residency? And what is the definition of next to study area? Is it 500 feet or 5 miles? It's a problem. Secondly, there is no indication of the demographics of those that were polled, whether young, old, single, married, or whether they're long-term permanent residents of Dublin. Basing planning decisions on transient populations is problematic. It could destroy the character of Dublin as we know it based on people that really aren't invested in our community. So I continue. The third page asks, if your job is in the study area, what is most needed to improve your work experience? Check all that apply. The wording of the question first omits those who live near the area but do not work in the area, and secondly, fails to clearly elaborate what is most desired. On face value, it supports the conclusion that workers, and mind you, workers, not actual residents, would favor nearby retail and restaurants to improve their work experience. Meanwhile, our neighborhood experience is not even included in those results. But how would that change if you were only allowed to select 2 of those options? Or allowed the same question to be answered by local residents of the community? Mind you, more people now have signed this petition than were originally polled by the consulting group. We're looking at a very statistically irrelevant conclusion. So basically, I could continue, but I think you're getting my point. We're missing a lot of data here, or there's a lot of data that's being omitted. And this is not new. Basically, even famous polling companies like Gallup are always working on their polling methodologies, the numbers polled, the demographics. And Gallup is rather famous for actually predicting that Thomas Dewey would beat Harry S. Truman for the presidency. Let's not make the same mistake. Secondly, any good business plan contains risk analysis. I didn't see anything in there. Clear liabilities and responsibilities, a cost-benefit analysis, a clear stepwise plan on how to progress with a budget and with clear go, no-go decision points. If I were to present this to my executives at Honda, they would laugh me out of the room. Dublin needs to be concerned about infrastructure, traffic, police, fire, and school needs. How will these be handled? Who will pay? Where is the traffic analysis? How is this going to influence the traffic in the area? It appears that the plan basically says, let's rezone with no restrictions. It'll all be good. That is until Dublin is sued because someone wants to build something that's less desirable in that area because there was lack of foresight and planning as to what we should restrict and what we should allow. So this truly shows that we need prudent planning and foresight, and not foresight based upon a very flawed and potentially biased public input study and an extremely incomplete draft plan. Additionally, this no restriction zoning is disrespectful and irresponsible to the residents that are neighboring these areas. It clearly overrides and ignores the multiple projects that the neighbors have in years past said are inappropriate east of France Road. So basically, the issues with public input results, the fact that now we have more people signing a petition than were originally polled, and the lack of explicit zoning limitations for areas immediately next to legacy neighborhoods, these are all unacceptable. Now is our only opportunity to rethink the impact of unrestricted zoning immediately adjacent to neighborhoods and recognize that Dublin's neighborhoods and citizens are what makes Dublin a desirable place to live to a much greater extent than what businesses are around. Our voices should always be more important than the consultants' conclusions, especially when community input data is so poorly collected and analyzed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kreidler. I did notice Mark Martin also signed in on this topic. Mr. Martin? Welcome.
My name is Mark Martin, and I live at 4211 Rings Road, and I'm the Vice President of Llewellyn Farms Civic Association. And these gentlemen have said a lot of things that I agree with, but the biggest thing that I would like to point out is that historically Dublin has always done, well, first of all, I should back up a little bit. I live right across from the open cornfield there that's been there for 30 years or longer than that, but we've lived there 20, and I always get a lot of jokes from people that aren't you worried about a Walmart going in across the street from you, and I could always confidently say that I wasn't worried about that because I always thought that Dublin did a very good job of blending their commercial areas with their residential areas. So I was somewhat surprised when I saw this plan that allowed the potential for multi-story apartments and hotels and restaurants butted right up against a residential area. So I am here on behalf of the Civic Association to say that that concerns us. There's a walking path that Dublin has spent a lot of money along Rings Road to connect with the bike path that was already along where Llewellyn butts up against the low-level office buildings. And there's a lot of land up there that allows you to put the kind of restaurants and things to create a walking area to make Metro Place more desirable, that I would think that we could still come up with some sort of a compromise on a buffer zone between the corporate area and the residential area that it's going to butt right up against. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, appreciate it. Did anybody not think to sign in, or has gotten a little courage sitting here listening to others speak and they'd like to step up and voice their concerns? Okay. Dana? What say you?
Well, first, thanks to our residents for coming forward and making us aware of that. You know, certainly I appreciate the compliment on the history of the city and what's made it great and the way of its planning. We intend to keep it that way. And this is why we have great residents who come forward and put their energy forward and get involved in the process. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Vince Papsadero, Director of Planning, and let him update you perhaps on process and schedule and so forth.
Absolutely. Good evening. We have been working with the neighborhoods, with multiple neighborhoods throughout the process. As Council may remember, this started almost 4 years ago with early work on the Legacy Office Park research. We've been diligently working on the plan update for about a year now. We've had multiple workshops, good turnout, generally speaking. Many of the data that's been collected has occurred at those workshops based on those attendees. At this point in time, we're working on completing the final details in the plan. We promised the neighborhood we'd be responding with draft material within, our goal had been last week. The consultant team's been a bit slow, and we expect to get that out within the week. But then our goal has always been to show up then at Planning Commission with a complete document, late September, early October, then on to council beyond that, once the Planning Commission has recommended its adoption. So we've been working through the process, and we're near the end of it. And it's been a good process to date in terms of participation.
I guess a couple things to emphasize. When we talk about engagement, we talk about workshops, we talk about plans, we use the words final drafts, we use things like that. It's not done.
Absolutely.
And there's much more opportunity for input, particularly when it comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's their mission, as given by council, to invite that and to facilitate that input process and evaluation. So I don't know that if there'll be other engagements prior to actually getting into that pipeline or not of review, but nonetheless, I certainly want residents to know to please, call, email, let us know what those concerns are, and keep that information flowing to the staff so that can be forwarded to the consultant and to the commission.
Absolutely. In fact, 2 weeks ago, 4 of us spent a morning with Sven and the neighborhood, walked the properties, walked that area, and heard firsthand from them their perspective about development on the other side of the fence from their backyards, which is the Kramer Creek Court Office Park. So we did spend a couple hours with them in the neighborhood, which was very insightful and helpful to understand their perspective.
Vince, I too met with them and walked that probably in the same footsteps that you did as well. And a lot of the conversation was circulated around a greenway connectivity coming through the Kramer Creek and heading north up to Rings Road and across, which would get them into, would provide a great greenway access into the historic core. So I guess I just want to go on record and hope that you hear, so we don't have to redo a whole lot, is I think that we need to look at some preservation of those creeks in the form of greenways and connectivities. I don't know that we need to do an overlay district or something like that. I'm hopeful that we do it. In my mind, overlay districts are things that we didn't get right the first time, and we come back and we try to correct it. So I don't know that we don't have anything adopted yet, so we don't have the need to overlay anything. We just have the need to do it right. But I really want us to look through those creeks and look through those connections for some great, it's really a beautiful area that certainly deserves to be preserved, and to have greenways to connect to it so that the entire community has the opportunity to enjoy it, not just out of the backyard of one neighborhood.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, Vince, what your thoughts are on responding to the resident concerns that you've heard tonight and before it ends up at Planning Commission, because I guess I just want to take exception a little bit to the idea that the residents need to come back to Planning Commission and keep, doing this. It seems to me that, they're not unreasonable at all in terms of what their ask is, and might we be able to take some pieces and parts out of the plan so that they can have some assurance that there isn't this desire to rezone everything to allow all these different uses that are objectionable, kind of take that out of the plan and make it neighborhood friendly, which I think was all of our intent. We recognized early on, you've got neighborhoods that are abutting some of this, and we're going to have to, be sensitive to what, perhaps might work, as the residents pointed out, for the corporate folks, might not work so well for the homeowners and the neighbors there that live in close proximity. I mean, we know from lots of experience, what are good neighbors to residential neighborhoods and what are not so good neighbors. And it seems to me that we could probably go pretty far to satisfy everyone's concerns before it gets to the Planning Commission, so we don't have to have a room full of people that are very nervous about, the investment in their home.
Right. Well, all along throughout the process, I think we've been very clear that it's important to provide safeguards to the adjacent neighborhoods that are up and down France Road and behind property, the office development south of Rings. We've said that all along in terms of height limits, use limits. We've been pretty clear, I think, throughout the process. One of the things that we committed to at our meeting in the neighborhood, and that we've said to other stakeholders, was that when we got this next set of more detailed information that is site-specific, particularly to the undeveloped parcels within the entire planning area, that we would be forwarding that to everyone and then be available to meet to discuss those more refined, more detailed policies before the plan is actually done. So we have made that offer, and we'll continue to do that before the document is actually submitted to Planning Commission. The other thing we've done is frankly slow down our schedule a little bit because of the number of vacant parcels throughout this area, and wanting to do an extra round of outreach to all the owners, which are, as well as the adjacent civic associations, are also corporate owners that we need to touch base with as well. So that's why we pushed this back a little bit towards the end of September or the beginning of October. So we'll be doing that outreach pretty diligently.
Were you looking to do area rezonings for this or individual rezonings?
One of the goals of this process was to try to streamline the zoning process for the entire planning area, building on the model that has been put in place for the West Innovation District. So our goal conceptually has always been to consider one comprehensive rezoning of the entire planning area, having sub-districts that speak to land use height, density design standards, as well as adopting design guidelines to go with that rezoning. So it has been our goal. That process won't begin until next year.
I guess I would caution us a little bit on that. One of the reasons it worked so well in the West Innovation District was the lack of adjacent neighbors. And so we had a lot more flexibility and freedom. And perhaps if you were looking on the west side of France Road, maybe some area rezonings might be appropriate. I don't know that east of France Road area rezonings are, I wouldn't be supportive of doing area rezonings on the portion that's east of France Road. Because the same reason that we have done area rezonings in the places that we have is the sensitivity to adjacent neighbors. In giving that zoning away without knowing the development that comes in, we lose a lot of control. And when we have adjacent residential neighborhoods, I think it's important that we retain that control.
Sure, and I certainly agree with you. I think specific to Llewellyn Farms, the property that they're most concerned with is zoned suburban office, so it has very few restrictions on it other than the standard, landscaping requirements and those sorts of things. So we're actually hoping to add more restrictions to protect the neighborhood. But there are other places, just as you're suggesting, where that may not be necessary. So we were going to really dive into that in detail in the next phase of this project.
From a timing perspective, Vince, when do you think this is going to the Planning and Zoning Commission?
At this point, it'll either, actually, we met this morning to look at our calendar through October, so it could be the first meeting in October, depending on how we work through communication with all these different stakeholders.
And then do you have a wild guess as to when it'd be in here?
It could be your second meeting in October or into November. It just depends on how that plays out. The Planning Commission may want to spend some time with this plan. We're also hitting them with the West Innovation District plan update at the same time. So that's a lot of work on top of all the casework. So it may take a few meetings to work through their review, which would be totally fine.
Okay.
Vince, there's a large parcel catty corner from Field of Corn that's adjacent to Waterford Village. Tell me how that all fits into this discussion.
Sure, the Thomas property. So to date, we have, as part of our planning area boundary, that is basically two large parcels. The western half of that parcel, which fronts on France Road, is in our planning area. So conceptually, we have talked about residential, maybe lower scale office, maybe a little bit of neighborhood retail on the street frontage, all of that under a 3 to 2 story height limit, pretty low intensity, which seems to be consistent with what we've heard from a market standpoint. But again, our recommendations are, we're trying to be general, so we're not overpromising anything in terms of, from a land use perspective. We're being very sensitive to what is adjacent to the north and to the south, as well as to the west, where, the bulk of our commercial development ought to be. This really needs to be principally residential in character. So that's been our focus on that property.
Well, thank you to all you folks that came in on this issue. I think it's just important, one, to stay involved and continue in the conversation. We have a staff that's committed to our community. We have P&Z that's committed to our community, and this council's committed to our community. So please do stay involved. And it is, I guess, important to remember that this is a process, and it does take a while. They're natural growing pains that we go through from time to time, and it takes a while for us to get there, but we'll get there. Whose kid is it hugging the Field of Corn thing on there? Is that yours? That's a Google image. Oh, okay, all right. Well, see, all right, he was a placeholder then. Okay, thank you very much, you guys, for coming. Jane Fox. Welcome.
Hi, how are y'all?
Fine, thank you.
Jane Fox, 6193 Dublin Road. I'm here because I wanted to speak to you about this public engagement. We have some really interested citizens, and I've seen it when in the Historic District too, as we come through these planning processes. So I'm really hoping to ask you to support that engagement of the Civic Association and those interested citizens early on in the roundtable discussions that you would find when you're beginning to do some of these plannings. Vince mentioned that the Metro Blazer Park has been going on for about 4 years. And it would be nice, I think, especially in some of these early planning processes, that you might think about inviting some of the civic associations or interested citizens just to sit down and do a little brainstorming. It doesn't have to be something that absolutely directs the planning, but sometimes these really creative solutions from people who live in the neighborhood, who actually understand it intrinsically, might be able to bring some thoughts and opinions to the table that people in planning might not have thought of, or that were not necessarily considered as essential because you don't live there and you're not there every day. The public meetings don't really offer the same opportunities to develop these comprehensive solutions that you get in a roundtable discussion. I know that when you have your work sessions, you have an opportunity to kind of spin ideas off of each other. That kind of a collaborative sharing brings really interesting, percolates things to the table that maybe you might not have thought of before. So I'm asking maybe that we kind of change the flow of information from the citizens, to the city's planning department, to you, so that maybe early on you can bring people together to talk about what they'd like to see happen. Walkability and urbanism is very interpretive. You have this wonderful 1.5 square mile area of Metro Blazer, and I'm not really speaking just to Metro Blazer, but I'm thinking about all the places that need to be developed. Those are opportunities to create these wonderful walkable urban environments for people that are in adjacent neighborhoods. Our green spaces could be interconnected. If we just look at the zoning and we don't get an opportunity to hear what the vision of the neighbors want to see next to them, you're only looking at half the picture. You can get this comprehensive view that says to you, let's just say Llewellyn Farms and Waterford says, we'd really like to see more restaurants, we'd like to see a park, we'd like to see a fountain, we'd like to see bike paths, we'd like to see all those things. If you know that early on, you can incorporate it. When it comes back to these public meetings, you have the opportunity then to have more of a shared collaborative talk, because the public meetings don't offer any time to do that. So I'm just encouraging you to look at early roundtable discussions, and in doing that, you change the flow, you let creative thoughts happen, and that shared vision will strengthen the whole community, and it'll definitely bring economic benefits, because more and more people will want to stay and live and work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, is there anybody that wants to get anything off their chest and forgot to sign in? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Does any council member wish to remove either of the two items that are on the consent agenda?
I do not wish to remove something from the consent agenda. I just have a question for legal on one of the items, and it is with regard to Resolution 6217, Item 9, reimbursement. C at the bottom is this payment by the city. In the bottom of the second half of the sentence says, the City of Dublin will promptly pay the City of Columbus 100% of the maximum cost up to the actual cost of the project for all work due under the terms of this agreement. Are we paying 100% of the maximum cost of the 62,310, or are we paying what it cost to do up to 62,310?
I think I'll have to ask Megan how firm that number is, but it's just, if that number isn't met, it would be whatever's underneath that. Yeah, we're just getting a cap, so that.
Because to me, it reads that we pay 100% of the maximum cost.
Right.
Not the, you'll edit that. Okay.
Yep.
I just think I think if we flip maximum cost and actual cost.
Sure.
I think we have the right
Yep.
sentence. That's all. Thank you.
Okey-doke. I make a motion that we approve the two items on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Ann?
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Ordinance 51-17, Ann?
Approving, amending sections 91.28, 29, and 99 of the Dublin Code of Ordinances to remove pit bulls from the definition of vicious dog, to change the definitions of a dangerous dog and a vicious dog, to require the owner of a dangerous dog to obtain a dangerous dog registration certificate, and to change the penalties involving ownership of nuisance, dangerous, and vicious dogs.
Jennifer?
Good evening, council members. In 2002, the city held hearings on potential regulations regarding dangerous and vicious animals. At the time, the city decided to enact local restrictions that mirrored state law, and that included defining all pit bulls as vicious regardless of their behavior. In 2012, Ohio law changed, and pit bulls were no longer classified as vicious by nature. Instead, the Ohio Revised Code created 3 categories for problematic dogs. Those are nuisance, dangerous, and vicious. To fall into any of these categories, a dog would have to exhibit certain conduct that's defined in the statute. In 2013, an ordinance similar to ours was struck down by the 3rd District Court of Appeals, which includes Union County, and another ordinance similar to ours was struck down by the 5th District Court of Appeals, which includes Delaware County. Based upon these court decisions, the city's current regulations on dangerous and vicious animals would not be enforceable in the portions of the city located in Delaware and Union. While Franklin County is not ruled on this issue, it's unlikely that the decision would be different. Therefore, to have consistent enforceable regulations across the city and to be consistent with state law, staff recommends approval of ordinance number 51-17. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I've asked my colleague, Stephen Smith, to appear today because he was involved in the original revisions back in 2002, and will address any of your concerns. Thank you.
Questions from council?
I just have one. It's on page 3 of 9, under confinement of dogs at the bottom of the page, item B, just last 2 words are in leash, and I'm wondering if we want them in leash or if we want them on leash.
On leash.
On.
Anything else?
That's all I had, thank you. I'm just,
So I've got a couple questions. So to fall into any category, we have definitions now under the state law and under the legislation you're proposing. So they define a dangerous dog would be defined by actions that include causing injury to someone or killing another dog. We define a nuisance dog would be defined as a dog that without provocation and while off the owner's premises chased or approached someone in a menacing way or attempted to bite or endanger someone. And we define a vicious dog would be defined as a dog that has killed or seriously injured a person without provocation. So help me understand why we would adopt legislation that says somebody has to be killed or maimed before we actually define a vicious dog. And why would we want to adopt that here in Dublin if we have to rely on the state law, and because the state Supreme Court has issued that edict accordingly? And I do have some stats which I did look up. It's interesting that Ohio is the second largest number and cost of dog bite claims in the United States. We spent, I have stats through 14, $530 million in claims. And, I mean, it just seems, it seems incredible to me that we would not want to be more prudent with the health, safety, and welfare of our residents.
Well, and if I may address the second part of your question first as to why we would adopt the local ordinance in Dublin. We have, along with most of our traffic code and criminal code, adopted the same, in many instances, the same standard as exists under state law. And we do that so that we have local jurisdiction to deal with those issues at the local level in terms of our mayor's court. I'm sure if any of you have ever been to municipal court, it is a very busy environment where the judges are hearing 100 cases a day. The officers, when they're subpoenaed to go down there, have to drive downtown, which, as you know, is difficult, find parking. They're off the street for that amount of time, whereas at in mayor's court, if they're on duty, they walk across the hallway. So we've always mirrored state law in a lot of respects, just because, frankly, it saves us time and money, mostly the officers' time and then money and pay. Not to mention the time they're sitting down there, because municipal court is not an efficient operation most of the time. So that's why we would mirror state law in many instances. In this case, the state legislature has determined, and just to back up briefly, under home rule, we have sole authority over local government matters. And if it's a local government matter, we can do whatever we want, and frankly, nobody, the state or otherwise, can tell us different. The problem is the second category under home rule is matters that fall under the police powers: health, safety, welfare. The courts have determined that dogs fall under the police powers: health, safety, and welfare. Therefore, in order to have an ordinance that's enforceable, we cannot be in conflict with the general law of the state. And unfortunately, at least in this case, the courts have determined, and it hasn't been our cases, it's really Reynoldsburg that got us in the other case, they've determined that this is an area that is a general law of the state. Now, the interesting thing is, when the state law changed in 2012, prior to that, we had great cases from the Ohio Supreme Court that basically said, hey, dogs are a local issue, you deal with them how you see fit. The legislature changed the law, and now the cases we're getting from the courts, I mean, the law changed in 2012, and by 2013, we already had a court decision against a law like ours decided by the Court of Appeals. I mean, that thing flew up through the dockets, and frankly, the courts have been willing to say, hey, state legislature, you've made your decision, we've determined it's a general law, so everyone has to be in lockstep if you want to be enforced. Previously, before the change in 2012, there were really two categories of dogs. We had vicious and we had dangerous. What the state has basically done is now create a third level, which is the nuisance, and they've kind of shuffled everything down in the pack. Nuisance is now what dangerous used to be for all intents and purposes. Dangerous is now kind of what vicious is used to be, and now vicious is reserved for the horrific acts.
After the fact.
And unfortunately, what the state has saddled us with is we have regulations on the books that apply all across the state of Ohio that are reactive in nature, and they do not give us an opportunity to be proactive in nature in dealing with these. And, at this point in time, I mean, we're stuck in a situation where we have a law on the books that frankly is most likely unenforceable in Franklin County. We know it's not enforceable in Delaware and Union County, so we have a law that cannot be applied equally. And in order to get one that can be applied equally, we either adopt the state code or frankly, we repeal ours and the state code's going to apply anyway. And once we do that, like I said, the one downside to that avenue is those cases go down to municipal court where they may not receive the due attention. I mean, in mayor's court, when we handle things locally, our magistrates have the ability to really stay involved in the case. I mean, for those of you who have been to mayor's court or seen mayor's court, we get to deal with local issues at the local level. It gives us the most control over the case. Unfortunately, you're right, it's control after the fact. And what the state has done, and I sat through the testimony originally when we did this in 2012, or 2002, excuse me. We had experts come in, and frankly, I think I remember some of you being there, Mr. Reiner, and we heard testimony about this. I chaired a committee in another city a couple years ago where we said 12 weeks of testimony over the classifications of dogs, and what the law has been changed to reflect is a dog will not be classified into one of these three categories unless it acts accordingly. We're no longer going to look at a dog and by nature say, you are vicious by nature, which the law had previously done with pit bulls. And that was always difficult too, because pit bulls, if you talk to the kennel associations and all them, that encompasses a wide variety of types of dogs. Now the law says, hey, we're going to wait and see what a dog does before we decide to lump it into one of these categories. And unfortunately, you're right, Mr. Keenan, it is completely reactive in nature.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Amy?
I was just curious if this changes the burden on residents who might own, a certain type of dog or a dog with a certain level of behavior. What might our residents have to do or have to add? Do they have to do anything different than what they're doing now?
They really don't. I mean, we have always encouraged, and I know, and I used to see these cases in mayor's court a lot, not a lot, but with dog cases, and a lot of the residents like, well, I didn't want to call because the dog was just running around the neighborhood. I mean, I think that what this law requires our residents to do with this change is to be more proactive. If you see dogs running around or you have issues with dogs, a lot of times I'll hear about it after the fact where someone will say, oh, did you know that dog bit somebody? But, well, did you call the police? Well, no, the dog just bit somebody. And, frankly, along with everything else, we do, we need to know about these things so that when the time is appropriate or when incidents like this occur, we can take the appropriate steps under the law to classify the dog so that we will take those steps to protect, the residents. But we can't do that if we don't know about it. So I think with the change or this proposed change that you're considering tonight, I think what we would do is what we'd always do and ask that our residents be proactive in this and call us when they're aware of these types of situations. I mean, the dog that's always running around unsupervised outside usually never leads to anything good. But if we don't know about these incidences where we can try to address them with the owners, and frankly, from the cases I saw in mayor's court, 95% of the time, it isn't the dog, it's bad owners. So the earlier that we can address these issues before they become a problem is better. So that we just ask that everyone be proactive in contacting us with these.
And you can call the police and file a police report without charges being filed? or anything like
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's times, frankly, where even under the laws that exist, we've tried to classify dogs that as dangerous or vicious when, I had one, for instance, where a kid ran across someone's yard and the kid was trespassing. Okay, and the dog bit the kid, and we still move forward to classify the dog as dangerous at that point in time, even though the kid was trespassing. Now, it was an attack dog, it was trained for that. So, that case, we did have a police report, we did move forward and do that, but we need to be aware of these things for us to be able to take action under the law.
And even if everybody's got a cell phone, right? Document it, take
Absolutely.
a video, do whatever you need to do to document
Absolutely.
behavior. Okay, any other questions? Ann?
Ms. Salee? Mr. Keenan? No. Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Ludo?
Yes.
Ordinance 52-17.
Rezoning approximately 2.9 acres from PUD Planned Unit Development District to PUD Planned Unit Development District for amendments to the approved development text to permit the conversion of 36 townhome units and 6 buildings to 20 single-family lots within an existing residential development.
You just,
Yes, staff recommends city council postpone this ordinance at this time. We're still digging into some information per your questions at your
is there
last
anybody
meeting.
that came for this specific purpose? I don't want to waste their trip. With that, I make a motion that we postpone ordinance 52-17 until September 11th.
A second.
Ann?
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
And Ms. Salee?
Ordinance 53-17, Ann?
Petitioning the Board of County Commissioners of Union County, Ohio, to adjust the boundary lines of Jerome Township so as to exclude that territory that, as a result of annexation, now lies within the corporate boundaries of the city of Dublin.
Dana?
Yes, so this ordinance authorizes City Law Director to petition the Board of Union County Commissioners of Union County to adjust township boundaries in Union County such that this annexed territory would be removed from Jerome Township and placed in Washington Township. This is consistent with our past practice over the years as we annex. The boundary adjustment will ensure that Washington Township has the ability to impose levies and compensate and to provide services consistent with the rest of the city. As the title mentions, reparations will have to be paid to Jerome Township as a result. Those reparations will be paid by the petitioner to the city of Dublin, who will in turn then pay those reparations directly to Jerome Township. Staff recommends approval.
Questions from council?
I have one question under Section 3. The city law director is hereby authorized and directed to present a certified copy of this ordinance and a certified copy of the minutes to this meeting to the Board of County Commissioners of Union County as a petition praying for such changes. I think, is that paying?
It's praying, is asking for.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Archaic.
I'd not seen that before in the things, but I suppose it might be a prayer as well.
Sort of old school language from.
We all need to pray every once in a while. Any other questions? Ann?
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
I make a motion that we waive council rules of order to discuss ordinances 54-17 through 58-17 together. Is there a second?
Second.
Ann?
Ms. Salee? Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes. So I guess, Ann, you just need to read the names of each of the property
Right.
owners.
Ordinance 5417 is the Geikie Company, 7600 Fischel Drive. Ordinance 5517, Jeffrey T. Beckman, 7423 Cosgrave Road, and 7505 Plain City Road. 5617, these parties are Kevin Bennington, Mark Bryant, Larry Clark, and Mark Palmer, successor co-trustees of the Duroc Trust, southeast corner of State Route 161 in Cosgrave, and at 7520 Plain City Road. Ordinance 5717 is Jeffrey Weingarten, Virginia M. Acosta, 7453 to 55 Cosgrave Road, and 58 is Ralph Smucker, 7500 Plain City Road.
No change from the introduction of these ordinances previously.
Questions from council? All right, so we can just vote once, right?
Yes.
Is that right, Jen? Just one vote? Okay, Ann?
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes. I move to waive the council rules of order to address ordinances 60-17, 61-17, and 62-17 together. Is there a second?
Second.
Ann?
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ordinance 60-17, determining to proceed with the acquisition, construction, and improvement of certain public improvements to the city, in the city of Dublin, Ohio, in cooperation with the Columbus Regional Energy Special Improvement District. Ordinance 6117, levying special assessments for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving certain public improvements in the city of Dublin, Ohio, in cooperation with the Columbus Regional Energy Special Improvement District, And 6217 is authorizing and approving an energy project cooperative agreement by and between the City of Dublin, Ohio, the Columbus Regional Energy Special Improvement District, France Investments LLC, and the Columbus Franklin County Finance, a special assessment agreement by and between the City of Dublin, Ohio, the County Treasurer of Franklin County, Ohio, the Columbus Regional Energy Special Improvement District, and France Investments LLC, and related agreements, all of which provide for the financing of special energy improvements projects.
I'll introduce the aforementioned ordinances.
Thanks, Tim. Dana, Jeremiah?
This is, yeah, we'll tag team this probably. This is continuing legislation that, as a result of what you saw at your last meeting, the resolutions regarding the PACE project and the financing for that, regarding 5500 France Road. Staff recommends approval of these ordinances at your second reading, which we anticipate to be on September 11th. We will also be requesting that you would pass these by emergency and waive the 30-day waiting period at the second reading. The reason for that is that the owner would like to try to get this process in progress and get this equipment installed before the season turns. Wish we could have got this to you sooner, but we were learning a lot through this process, and this is the first time we've taken one of these projects through. So I think in the future we'll be a little bit quicker about how we get that done. But I think for the safety welfare of that particular property and to try to get this turned around would be appropriate to pass that as an emergency on the second reading. And other than any specific questions you may have about the agreement or so forth, I think Jeremiah is here to do that, as well as, I think I saw Gene Carter Ryan here from the Franklin County Finance Authority, who you met at your last meeting.
Jeremiah, anything you want to add?
Unless you have any specific questions.
Any questions from council?
I just wanted to outline that I appreciate all that staff's done to the learning process that is PACE. And I think it's important for us to, if we're contemplating emergency legislation, is to understand that there is, that's the only way that the city participates in this, is creating the district. Everything that happens from that point forward, this is really a loan application. And what we're doing is making this district happen so that they can apply for a loan, and that the city itself does not participate in the funding or in support of or backing in any way of essentially this loan application.
Right.
So the emergency legislation, I think, may be more appropriate in this scenario, because we don't participate in it in any fashion other than allowing them to be deemed by our state government as someone who is eligible for this type of loan.
Right, great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And you know, given that some of the audience may have not been at the last meeting, this enables this property owner to get a loan, not from the city, but to pass through the city from the Columbus Franklin County Finance Authority, and then to be assessed through their assessment property tax to pay that back. So yeah, there's no financial burden on the city. We're just facilitating the process.
We do have a financial interest in terms of, don't we provide money for the ESCOs or for the audits?
Yeah, so the front end of the energy audits themselves were part of our investment for office competitiveness projects.
So I just want to be clear that while we're not involved with the loan, we do
Correct.
and have supported this program, and it's worthwhile, there's no doubt.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you.
This is the first to convert, yep.
Anything else from council? Okay, we'll see everybody back on that on September the 11th. Introduction public hearing on resolutions. Resolution 63-17,
It's
Ann?
appointing a member to an unexpired term on the Architectural Review Board.
I'll introduce
Chairman of our
it.
administrative committee, Michael.
Pleased to report that we have a very qualified addition to ARB, and that would be to appoint, I'll make a motion to appoint Gary Alexander to fill the vacancy that was created by Jane Fox's resignation, and that term is set to expire on March 31st, 18.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Amorose Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. Saludo?
Yes.
And Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
And my understanding is he is ready to go. We're going to swear him in Wednesday night. So there we go. Resolution 64-17, Ann?
Accepting the grounds of remembrance updated landscape plan.
I'll introduce it.
Thanks, Amy. Dana?
Yes, just quickly, as a result of the new development sites and associated roadways with the library and the downtown Dublin parking garage, there's an opportunity to establish a landscape buffer along the southern edge of the grounds of remembrance, and that information is presented herein, and I think Matt's going to speak to this.
Yeah, I'll just briefly, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As Dana mentioned, this is about the updated landscape plan. It's the area along the proposed Rockcrest Parkway and certainly abutting the Veterans Park and grounds of remembrance. So there's a certain level of detail and respect for the area to create or to continue to have a place of reflection, but all in the same time providing an opportunity to bring a little bit more light to the park itself. I'll say that during this process, we've captured input from multiple audiences, including our staff. There was a Veterans Committee that was developed in order for us to seek a little bit more of that input from those that were involved with the project at the Grounds of Remembrance. We also sought input and feedback from the artist, Lisa Rappaport, from Plant Architects. So we've received a fairly across-the-board types of input, a lot of compliments, some concerns, many of which were able to address, and then there were some suggestions and things that I think MKSK will be able to provide a presentation here before you tonight that will bring some of these things to light and certainly, hopefully, offer some discussion. But in the end, we are recommending approval of this resolution. So I'm going to turn the microphone and the podium over to Darren Meyer, principal at MKSK, who's been our key principal designers for this project.
Mayor and council members, it's nice to see everyone this evening. As Mr. Ehrman mentioned, we've had a great process that we've gone through. Since we last spoke with you about this project in early March at a council work session, we did, again, speak with the artist. We had the opportunity to meet with our advisory committee again for the third time to capture input as we move through this, and wanted to give you a brief update on our progress. To orient you to the project, this shows some of the emerging plans in the Bridge Street District as it's centered around the Soda River corridor. So we have north off to the right-hand side of the drawing. And this is High Street through historic Dublin. You can see the development that's happening here at the intersection of High Street and the future Rockcrest Parkway. This is the Indian Run Greenway, which extends to the west. You can see the pedestrian bridge here. And there are a number of developments that are happening in the general proximity of the grounds of remembrance. Again, some of the private development that you see here on the east side of High Street, the pedestrian bridge and its landing, and the new branch of the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Dublin. This is an enlargement with the same orientation. So again, you have the Indian Run Greenway here to the right-hand side. High Street is at the bottom of the image. You can see just a little bit of the developments here as they're under construction. You can see the current Metropolitan Library branch here. And what we've shown in red, this is the future proposed roadway connections around the library branch. So you can see some improvements to North Street, connection here along an extension of Franklin Street, and a portion of Rockcrest Parkway. Really, these are designed to serve the new branch and the parking structure, which will serve the library as well as provide public parking. And if you focus on one part of this drawing, we'll show you the relationship between the existing library building and the existing grounds of remembrance. So there's a black dot here and a distance here, which shows from the recognition walk to the back of the existing library building is approximately 93 feet. From the edge of the curb of the proposed roadway to that same point on the recognition walk is about 85 feet. So we're roughly the same distance from the existing back of the library building to the existing grounds of remembrance with the proposed roadway. One of the things that we want to do in terms of an approach to this project, given some of the increase in activity that's happening with the development around here and the new roadways, is we want to create a buffer around the grounds of remembrance so that we can protect those qualities that are important for the users of that memorial. Some of those honorific qualities, some of the reflective qualities you want to have in a memorial space. But at the same time, we worked with our committee and we worked with staff through this process to understand, are there opportunities to make this memorial have a better presence, a better public presence? And can we achieve both of those? The idea is to take the great natural qualities of the Indian Run Greenway and start to wrap those around the memorial so that effectively the grounds of remembrance becomes almost a clearing in a naturalized wooded area. And you can see some of the examples that we've shown here of the idea that we would have some densely spaced trees that would create somewhat of a filter or buffer, but not an opaque screen that would completely hide the memorial from the streets. And we have a change in ground plane. So today, the Grounds of Remembrance has a very manicured lawn feel. We would use a slightly taller grass, almost a meadow grass feel here. It would be about ankle or knee height to really set a little bit of a distinction between the Grounds of Remembrance and the public ways around it. This is a typical cross-section. This shows the proposed Rockcrest Parkway on the left-hand side. And you can see the associated tree lawn. This is the cycle track and the sidewalk that's adjacent to that. And then as you move towards the Ground of Remembrance, you see the existing recognition walk. You see the London Plains, which border that on either side, all of which is being protected and preserved in its current condition. And then in between those, you can see the landscape buffer that we described before, where we're looking at a high density of trees in here, some changes to the ground plane. This little white band that we see here is a maintenance edge to help provide a nice clean edge between the maintained turf and the ground cover here. So again, the idea is that we create this filter between the activity that's happening on the street and the conditions within the memorial. And we have a handful of views here which show the before and after conditions at the memorial. So starting alphabetically here, A, we're looking down the recognition walk. So this is the condition that exists roughly today, where you can see the bronze rail, you can see the recognition walk, the London Plains on either side. Just off to the left, this is the historic cemetery, and you can see some of that stone detailing. And if you focus on the right-hand side as we toggle through these, you'll see the change here that's being proposed. So I'm going to back up one more time. This is the existing condition, and this is proposed, where you can see the grove of trees here with the ground plane treatment. And just beyond, you get a little hint of the Dublin Library branch and the proposed Rockcrest Parkway. One of the questions that came up as we moved through the process with our advisory group is, when you have a solution that's largely landscape-based, what does that look like in winter? And part of the answer is, if you think about, for example, the Indian Run Greenway, which we've sort of modeled this natural area after, in winter, of course, a lot of those deciduous trees lose their leaves, and that's a condition of the landscape in central Ohio. And so we would have a very similar condition here, where you still have the density of trees. You have that kind of almost winter wheat appearance of some of the grasses that remain there. And of course, you have a little bit more open views with the foliage gone, but this gives you a sense of what that might look like in the wintertime. And we even have some users that are in the memorial here in the middle of the snowstorm. This is a view where we're looking to the south at the existing Dublin Library branch. You can see the recognition walk in the foreground, and again, the proposed condition. So this shows you a little bit of the proposed parking structure in the background, the library here off to the left, and again, the landscape treatment in the foreground. And I'll back up one more time here. And again, if you recall, the existing edge of Rockcrest Parkway is approximately in the same area of the back of this building, plus or minus 7 or 8 feet. And again, that's the proposed view. This is the one that is going to have a fairly dramatic change. So we are on High Street. We're looking to the west. And this is where Rockcrest Parkway is proposed. So among the changes that are happening, you can see the aerial power lines, which will be buried. Some of the overgrowth here will be removed. And you can see here the proposed Rockcrest Parkway. Library to the left, the cycle track and brick sidewalk. And this shows the landscape buffer. Now, there is a grade change So when you're at this corner, you have between 4 and 5 feet of grade change up to the level that you would be if you were at the loggia in the grounds of Remembrance. And as you move uphill, as you move west along Rockcrest Parkway up toward the school site, that grade change starts to diminish, and it effectively becomes zero about midway up that block. And then as you continue up to where Franklin connects, you're actually a little bit above the grounds of Remembrance at that point. We've reversed the view here, and we're looking back to the east. You can see a little bit of the redevelopment that's happening on the east side of the river, the proposed construction that's nearly complete here, and again, that approximately 4 to 5 foot grade change here. This case, we're standing at the threshold of the historic library entrance looking to the south, and you can see a little bit of the recognition walk here. And currently, this is the path where if you come from the parking lot at the library or just beyond, you would have a path that takes you here to the recognition walk or into the historic cemetery. That's going to be maintained, and you can see here that little bit of grade difference where I mentioned Rockcrest rises a little bit above the grounds of Remembrance at that western end. This is a view from that entrance. So this is one of the areas as you come from the new parking structure, which is just off the view here, which is likely to be a major source of parking for the memorial. You would come across the street, we would recognize the entrance to the memorial here, and then you would head down into it off to the left, and this shows the view down Rockcrest Parkway. And then lastly, this is a view looking along High Street to the south. You can see the existing monument sign here. Of course, one of the things that's happening at High Street, there are some streetscape improvements. Again, the power lines are going to be buried here. And one of the things that we did look at, if you look at the existing exposed bluffs, we are going to protect and preserve those as best we can. So we'll tie in our new wall that we'll tuck in just behind it back here. Of course, we'll preserve the existing monument sign, and this shows some of the proposed improvements to High Street. And this brings up a plan. This shows a detail of the improvements here at the intersection of Rockcrest and High Street. I'd be happy to take any questions on the project.
Thanks, Darren. Questions from council?
The Memorial Park is London plane trees. Is the idea to continue that theme all the way over to the street, to Rockcrest Parkway?
No, we'll probably look at a mix of some deciduous trees that distinguish themselves a little bit from the row of London planes there. We don't have all the species selected, but it would be a mix of large deciduous trees that would be placed in that buffer. It may include some London planes, but at the moment, the plan is not to use that tree as the predominant.
And the purpose is why? I'm just curious.
Say again, please.
Why?
It's partly to make sure that there is some differentiation between the original intent of the memorial and the buffer that we're creating between that and the street.
Okay.
I'm a little disappointed that we don't have tree species in here, because I think in order for this to be authentic, if we want it to look like a natural grove of trees, then it should in fact be a natural tree, a grove of trees that would naturally occur there.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be in various sizes and shapes and bark texture and all of those sorts of things. And we don't have any of that information here to tell, you know, it's supposed to be a landscape plan, and we don't have any plants.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a problem for me. I want to see what it is that we're signing up for. In this letter of this Lisa Rappaport, has she been here to present with you previously?
No.
Has she been here?
To Dublin?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine she was when the original memorial was developed, but I wasn't involved at that time.
She was here.
So she hasn't been here in, when was that? That was, okay. So there's this letter that she writes. It talks a lot about artwork and art form. What is the art form that we are trying to preserve?
I think from her standpoint, the art form is the existing grounds for remembrance.
Okay,
And
so the
all of the
structure?
elements that are part of that.
Okay. So,
It's the entire project, the walkway,
because there was a lot of discussion in here about the railings and should there be more railings, but they would take away from the original art form, and she doesn't want to have railings except where absolutely necessary. So maybe we could get some clarity on that. It says
Dana, this wasn't a public art project per se.
This particular process?
The grounds of remembrance.
It was in the sense that the Veterans Committee engaged an artist to design the logo.
We had a discussion about whether it was protected, federally protected, as public art can be.
Yeah, I don't know about federally protected, but I do know that the committee, as we sat with them and went through this buffering plan, the committee, in my opinion, wanted to stay true to the art form that's there, but they also, we suggested that we at least engage the artist for any perspective on the project. There was, I would say it was mixed whether they really felt we owed that to the artist or not, but we went ahead and did that and got some feedback from her on it, and we planned accordingly. I mean, I really don't think she had much of an influence on the buffer design other than the feedback that you saw in the letter, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so she talks about the existing guardrail is an art form that stands on its own as a form that frames and mirrors the cemetery and ravine, and the experience between any extension compromises the art form. So I was looking for some clarity about that.
I remember a discussion specifically about whether the artist really wanted that railing coming out to the entranceway off the original art piece or not, and I think that was the concern that she raised. I know the committee talked about that.
Yeah. This is the railing that she's referring to that has
Right.
the sculpted bronze profile for the rail there.
The next item that's discussed here is about the stone wall images. And she indicates that no new stone walls should be added. It says the artwork deliberately uses the smooth limestone and very controlled rugged limestone as a foil to the cemetery wall. So I saw several stone walls in here. Could you, oh, this is the perfect slide. So you see on the left the existing condition. You see the Dublin stone wall.
That's right.
With the bookshelf stack on the top. And it appeared to me in these images that the stone walls that are going to be constructed are not of a similar pattern of the ones that are existing on site.
That's correct.
Why would we, so we have, at present, we have our original stone walls, we have the poured monument sign, for lack of a better term. Why would we want to bring into this area yet another material used in a different way?
We would use the same material. We're looking at a number of different limestone options. The detailing may not have, you know, the stacked plates that you have on the historic cemetery wall. We're not proposing those, but we would look at using a similar limestone material.
So I think I'll say again, you know, Dublin Road, we've spent millions of dollars to create a stone wall in our gateway to welcome you into the historic district. And they're beautiful and well done. If we keep changing materials, it's no longer a welcome to Dublin, it's welcome to this block. And I think it's really important that we can, along Dublin Road, when we have opportunity to build if we're going to build a stone wall, they need to look like the same stone wall, because that's a continuity, that's a branding.
Right.
And that's who we are. So if we start introducing different kinds of stone walls here and there and somewhere else, we've lost our brand.
Well, I think the committee raised that very issue, and there was a discussion about the type of stone wall. Help me out, somebody. But I thought that the reason this was leaning this direction because it was more of a retaining wall as opposed to the dry laid stone that you would see up and down Dublin Road, and there was quite a bit of discussion about that issue. So did that not come into play with this? Because I know it was bantered about among the committee members.
That is part of it, yeah. And when we looked at an inventory of the stone in Dublin, you're certainly correct that there is a detail that's used to great effect with Dublin in terms of an identifier. When we looked at historic Dublin, if you think of some of the historic buildings there and even some of the wall remnants, there's actually a pretty great diversity of different stone patterns. And I think there's some value in looking at where there's opportunity to have a material that's familiar and indigenous, I'll say, to Dublin, but use it in a way that maybe isn't exactly mimicking some of the gateway features throughout the community.
Well, I look at the stone wall on our seal here, and it looks like the stone walls that we started building. And I don't know if there's any support. I think that it's our brand. It's who we are. We put it on our sign. I can't for the life of me figure out why we would switch gears in this very important part of our city. Certainly, any wall that would have ever been built in this location would have looked similar to that. Many of them are, in fact, retaining walls up and down the river. There's a lot of stacked stone walls with bookshelves on top that are, in fact, retaining walls. So perhaps it's just me, but
No, I think it's funny that you mentioned it. I was, looking at the material with Rory, my husband, and he said, why wouldn't you just put the regular Dublin wall there? And he's by no means an expert in landscape design. I have to defer to my colleagues who have expertise in that regard. But for sort of a layperson to point that one thing out was, in my mind, sort of an asterisk, like, oh, he noticed it? And if he's noticing it, others are going to notice it as well. And, it's odd because down in that area, we have a lot of differing materials. But I think the one constant that we do have is the Dublin stone wall. And I didn't really think of it until he said something to me about it.
Right.
So I think it's worth exploring. And I know that it was explored with the artist, and there was some conversation back and forth. At first she said, no walls, and then it was, well, we kind of need a retaining wall there. What should it be?
Right.
And then she sort of explored, well, maybe it should be juxtaposed, or maybe it really shouldn't be. Why wouldn't we go with the regular Dublin wall? So that conversation was expressed with the artist. I'm sort of not 100% clear where she landed, because she kind of went all over the place, but it seemed to me even she had that question as well. And certainly, we had questions as well about the specific plantings that were going to be in there, too. Because I'm worried about how again, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm worried about how those trees are actually going to look from the time that you plant them, and if they're really close together, what happens to them years down the road? Are they going to look like they were naturally there? Is the idea for it to be very, very sculpted and very formal looking? It doesn't seem like that's the idea. It seems like it's supposed to be a more natural setting. So maybe if we're going to have some densely packed together trees, there need to be some undercarriage stuff. I prefer to keep things that are native to our zone and our area, but it's hard for me to really see what that is through this.
Right.
And it's kind of like a buyer beware, and I don't really want to beware. I kind of want to know what I'm getting into. So those would kind of be my two comments. One's not my own, it's my husband's, but that's just my 2 cents from a layperson's perspective.
We're looking at and I think the artist wanted to keep her design separate, because we spent 2.5 years working with her on this design, as I recall. And so, now we're into a transitory position of a different kind of design element. So the idea of introducing other species of trees and trying to mask out the buildings, I get it. Originally we thought maybe this should be an evergreen screen and that would, be a complete transition. But, this is a fairly clever use of a interesting concept. So on the limestone thing, we had trouble with the artist. She was from another part of the world. And as you recall, she ground down the limestone for the markers. And we had trouble with those, servicing those, and problems with them, which, she wasn't exactly aware of how soft limestone is when you utilize it on a flat elevation. So on the wall thing, I can see, okay, we're using limestone again. It's a repetition of materials. It might be a different shape and design, so I sort of get that. Whether you want to use the Dublin type of Euro stone with the vertical cuts on the top. That's another whole issue. On the other thing that I didn't think she was very fair with was the railing. She saw her railing as a sole element that she designed, and whether we can utilize that in the rest of the design, she said, nada, no, don't want to see it. I don't know if that was exactly the kind of idea I think was forthright in sharing with the community after we'd paid her a large sum of money.
I liked the addition of the railings. I thought
Yeah.
more of them would be nice.
Yeah, but she definitely wanted to keep her railings to her particular design, which I thought was a little unfair since she was our client. But, you know, again, this is an artist, and we're working with an artist and their sensibilities, so. The bottom line is that I think you guys did a really pretty good job putting it all together. It's a different kind of concept, I think, than we originally envisioned, a stronger buffer. But I think the idea of bringing around the natural elements out of the forest area and wrapping it will give her the piece that she wanted, that her little design area is sacrosanct, and it's fine, and it's, you know, it's the London plane trees, and that's why I asked you the questions earlier. So I think it's going to be a pretty cool addition. With the change of grade, you're going to get a lot more buffering than people imagine because of the slope of the road going up and the retaining walls. The other thing about a natural limestone, and I do appreciate this aspect of it, they're trying to preserve the rock outcropping, especially
Yep.
down on High Street by our sign. And then, so how do you do that and still make that work right, you know, where you have just natural outcropping of limestone and then you have to come in with a man-made product. So, you know, however you handle that, it's going to be an interesting issue, and it's going to have to be handled in a sensitive way, so. But I think it's a really interesting project, and it's a pretty good solution. A little different from what we envisioned at first, but I think it's going to be really a nice addition to the area. Thank you.
So who is, and I know that it says here the city manager is hereby authorized to commence the final design of the recommendation improvements. Is that when the types of trees would be assigned to go in? I mean, is that the final design? Is that, and who is it that decides what kind of trees they are that are going to go in?
Yeah, our next steps in the process would be looking at the architectural details of the wall, selecting the tree species, soil details, those types of things.
There's another bite of the apple.
And then it comes back to us again?
Yeah, we can come back. In fact, I was going to ask for clarification on what it is you'd like to see. I mean, do you want to, are you in concurrence with the Veterans Committee staff recommendation here, or do you want to see these other changes? I don't think we had planned to come back with the detail on the trees and so forth, but I mean, we could certainly do that unless you want to defer that to the staff to do.
For me, the types of trees was just more of a curiosity, when and who makes that decision. The wall, they have sort of piqued my curiosity on that. And I'm wondering, one, can we find out if the typical Dublin wall is even viable? Does it, when you look at that image, does that grass come across right to the top of the wall, or is there stone on both sides?
So at the corner, you know, I mentioned the wall is between 4 and 5 feet high, and as you go up, it disappears into grade. So
But the ground does not come down and meet the top of the wall.
The wall effectively, you know, as the road's coming up, the wall stays roughly the same height, so it appears to disappear into grade.
I guess I'm talking going from left to right. If you were at that corner and you climbed over the wall, would you be on the ground, or would you step down to the grass?
Darren, we ran into some issues over at the Golf Club of Dublin when we were building the stone wall immediately behind that building. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. But that stone wall and the turf adjacent to it were to be flush.
Okay.
And when the inspectors came out, said, well, you need to put a railing on top of this wall because you can't have a flush retaining wall in a public space. It creates a safety hazard. Somebody's walking along and boom, all of a sudden they're 3 foot lower than they intended to be. So I think a stack stone would help us that transition where the wall could be the height of the adjacent turf or plant bed, whatever that is going to be. So we were told that there had to be at least I think it was a 9-inch deviation or lip, if you will, on the wall from the adjacent turf so that it was known by all people walking that there was a grade change ahead.
I see.
So I suspect that we would run into the same problem right there because it's a very similar condition.
We'll verify that. Yeah, that's a good comment.
You know, I think that I think what this corner represents is, are we going to transition into the library and become more sleek, refined, or are we going to let the library stand on its own and stay true to our history? And I think it's really important to stay true to our history on this site and let the library stand on its own accord, on its own architecture, and not try to go from the stacked stone walls that's going to be, I don't know, 150 feet over to the north, and then make this kind of transitionary wall that is not us and it's not them. And then come into the stone that is going to be, a very contemporary look stone on the building, on the facade of the library.
Right.
I just think that, the grounds of remembrance needs to stay whole.
Yeah.
And stay true to who we are. Let something else transition. We've got this park, or the memorial, sorry, I'm forgetting the term of what the library is doing out front, and we just approved the walls for.
Transition
The
element.
transitional element, thank you. We have, the library is doing its own transitional elements, and I don't feel compelled to transition on both sides for them. This is our Veterans Park. This is our piece.
Yeah.
And it should reflect us.
One question on your grass. You said the grass will be ankle high to knee high. So is this a low-mow grass that doesn't require any care? Is that what you're thinking?
No, it actually wouldn't require any mow at all. So we're looking, one of the options would be like a Pennsylvania sedge. I don't know if any of you have been to the new sculpture garden at the Columbus Museum of Art. In fact, I have a photo of it here. This is the plant material that we're looking at here. So it doesn't require any mowing, but this buffer, while it's designed to be naturalized, it's not going to be maintenance-free. No landscape is maintenance-free. So in order to preserve the effect we've shown there, you'd have to come in and do some weeding, get rid of some invasives and other material that comes in there. So you have that nice clean carpet down below and the trees above. But yeah, it's not a mow.
But that was turf species, right? So you could treat it with a broadleaf weed control in a turf area. We're not creating something that we're having to physically weed.
No, it's a ground cover.
So it'd be like blue tall fescue, something like that.
Yeah, we'll work through with staff the simplest way to care for it, to keep it looking.
And really, the idea is you're trying to raise the elevation, so you're picking up a little more of the buffering screening idea.
That's
So
right.
you have the tree canopy set at a certain elevation, let's say it's 5 feet or 4 feet, and then your transition is the ground cover coming up for another 2 or 3 feet, so you have a smaller gap.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
I don't know. For me, I support this whole thing. My only question is about this wall. Whether the other wall is possible, and if so, what would it look like?
Right.
And you're right, John, when it goes over, and it's really cool that you're going to try to save that exposed rock, whatever you call that. How's that going to look going right up next to it? I just don't know. And this issue about the railing, is there any way that that's me personally, that's my only concern about this whole project.
So if I may, unless there's other
We
comments,
just,
I guess my takeaway is generally you're okay with this. It's the wall issue, which I'm trying to read faces here without a vote. I think the direction is you want old wall. So old wall means something that looks like the dry laid walls. Can that be achieved? And then secondly, do you want to see the tree plan back to approve, or would you allow us to go ahead and, point taken, that you want that mixed, we'll make sure that that's mixed. Do you need this to come back for yet another approval, or are those the two things that we can go address and go forward? Totally, however you want it. Well,
I'm good with the trees if you walk the adjacent wood and you take the 4 or 5 hardwood species that you find, because that's going to be what's successful there. That's what it's suited for, and plant those. I'm fine with that.
I guess I'm interested in the wall, what it would look like if it was the typical Dublin wall with the top treatment, as we always see it. And I'm curious about the point that Chris makes with regard to the change in grade, and are we going to have an issue with people, walking off the edge of that? And is that stacking piece going to save us, from having that issue? But I'm curious what it would look like.
Why don't we get back with you on an information memo, we'll call it, and we'll research that. We'll get the tree thing done, for sure. Sorry to put it in those terms, but it's Dana's layman terms. And then the stone wall will evaluate. The committee had the same debate, and so if that's your direction and preference, we'll go back and look at that, and we'll address the railing issue, and if this stack.
Do you know what's going to happen
Stone
with
will
that
drift.
wall? If it's flat, there's no railing, every 6-year-old kid that walks by there is going to go up and get
I'll
up
be
on the
jumping off
wall.
of it. Are
Well,
you
Dana's
kidding me?
going to go run down that wall
On a skateboard, no
on a
less.
skateboard.
I have a lot of no climbing signs all over the place.
So do you want us to go ahead and vote on this? And do you want us to go ahead and vote on this, Dana?
I think that would be, I think the direction's in the record, if you'll let
So
the
you're
record
good.
speak, and then go ahead and act on this, and we'll go forward and make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Darren, appreciate it. Okay, we are to the other portion, final site plan, Riverside Crossing Park West.
You going to vote?
Oh, we are going to vote? I
Oh, we
thought you
have
said
a-
you had enough direction.
A resolution.
No,
Yes,
go ahead, and I'll let the
Oh,
record speak
okay.
to the changes, and then if you'll vote on this. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ann, please.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes, with reflect to the record.
Ms. Saleh?
Yes?
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Saludo?
Yes.
Now we're on to the other portion of the agenda, final site plan, Riverside Crossing Park West Plaza. Jen.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is the final site plan review for the West Plaza of the Riverside Crossing Park. Just to orient everyone to the location, we are here in this area outlined in yellow on the east side of North High Street. It's between Building Z, which is currently under construction, and then future development to the south, and will act as one of the pedestrian landings on the west side for the future pedestrian bridge. Just a quick overview of where we've been in terms of review process. We had the master plan adopted by council in May of 2016, which then culminated in the submission of the basic site plan, which was reviewed by PZC and ARB in November, and then was before council in December of last year, where the basic plan was approved by council. And council was then at that point designated as the required reviewing body for future applications. So that's why this final site plan is before you today. During that time, from December to June, a lot of staff time working with the consultant based on the feedback of the basic plan review, developing then the site plan, which was then submitted and taken to ARB for some informal review before coming before you tonight. ART has also reviewed this and made a recommendation as well. So we are recommending, ART is recommending approval of this application with a parking plan. Clearly, there's no off-street parking designated for this, given the location to the public parking garage, and then obviously existing patrons within the district and those crossing the pedestrian bridge back and forth, so the parking plan is required. I'm going to let Darren talk through the specifics. He's going to review what the basic plan included and how we've made modifications and refinements over that time that led to this recommendation of approval.
I wanted to introduce two other folks that are with us here tonight. Chris Kimbrell is my colleague with MKSK. He's been the project manager on all the Dublin public projects. James Peltier is here with EMH&T, and he's the civil engineer. So as we get into this discussion, if there are detailed questions, I may ask those folks to help address some of those. Our first image, the first few images we have mirror the timeline that Ms. Roush just showed. So this is the master plan that was approved by council in May of 2016, showing the public and some of the planned private improvements on both sides of the river. In October of that year, we brought forward as part of the basic site plan what was proposed Phase 1 for the public park. And this Phase 1 was really geared around towards responding to the adjacent infrastructure improvements, adjacent private development, and looking to see, as part of the capital planning process, what parts of the park we could bring online in conjunction with the development that's happening around there so that we get the greatest community benefit possible. If you look at the top of this image where we have some orange, this shows the portion of that basic site plan that we're bringing tonight for a view, which is just the west landing of the pedestrian bridge. And again, that is also relative to the timing of the improvements that are surrounding that in terms of sequencing construction and making sure that we minimize disturbance and have as good of a public space as possible to complement all the development that's happening around it. The notion of the west landing really is to create a connection to the pedestrian bridge, which is this link between the emerging urban neighborhood on the east side here and historic Dublin. And as part of that process, some of our earlier discussions, we were looking at how do we balance the need to protect the continuity of the street along High Street with architecture, but also make sure that that connection to the pedestrian bridge is not buried and hidden. It needs to be public and visible and legible and easy to find and easy to access. And so this west landing really provides that connection. And one of the things that we want to be really careful to do here as we start to look at this landing is there is really fantastic substantive views and improvements that are happening with the signature pedestrian bridge and with the river corridor, as well as some great architecture that's being developed around it with the library, the surrounding private development. So really this landing is providing, really revealing a lot of those fantastic views and fantastic experiences, and is certainly not the foremost visual piece in that mix of all items we just mentioned. So it's a very well-crafted, well-designed, thought-through space that opens up your views and opens up your experience to the river corridor, and the bridge. We're going to go through a series of enlargement slides that look at the primary materials, the grading, some of the landscape ideas, and the lighting solutions for this space. This first slide shows the materials plan. And one of the things we want to do is have a fairly seamless visually and functionally flow from the sidewalk out here on High Street, which is at the top of the view. The river would be down off the view to the bottom. This is the threshold of the pedestrian bridge. We want to have a seamless flow from the sidewalk, the public walk, into this plaza. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, the main paving material that we're proposing for the plaza is the historic Dublin sidewalk brick. So even though we're showing a dark dashed line here which separates our scope of work from the adjacent streetscape, in fact, when we look at the renderings, that's a seamless visual connection there. We're also looking at some bollards here which would help control traffic as it approaches the bridge. What you see here, really, we've gotten some comments from ARB, and we're looking at trying to strike a balance between the character of the historic district here with that architectural piece and what is happening as part of the larger system of the park and pedestrian bridge. So one of the things that we're currently considering is a simpler black bollard that's not represented here. So we're working on the selection of that piece of furnishing. And then these, I guess, sort of amorphous looking shapes really were not designed arbitrarily. As you start to look at the flow of pedestrians and traffic through here off the bridge and through the space, you can start to see how they accommodate some of these flows through here. And it starts to transition from the grid and the buildings that you see in historic Dublin, which fall into that sort of orthogonal pattern. And as we move toward the river and the pedestrian bridge, we're taking on a little bit more organic form. And these tie in very closely to some of what's being proposed on the east landing, sort of the bookend for this experience as well. So these are architectural precast benches that are here with the opportunity for some green space within them. We have a similar use of architectural precast for the stairs, which take you from this plaza level down along here. And those are the main materials that you see here in plan view. We have some images that will show materials of these walls here after a few slides. This shows the grading plan. There's not a whole lot to discuss on this. It's a fairly flat and level plaza. Obviously, we have to make some moves to accommodate positive drainage. But for the most part, the general experience of this is going to be a relatively flat landing, and it is at street grade. So you don't step down into this plaza. It's a seamless flow from the sidewalk. From a plant selection standpoint, probably the most important piece here is that all this plant material is low, because again, we want to have those views from Rock Crest, from across the street, from the sidewalk. As you move into this space, we want to open views out to the beautiful river and pedestrian bridge. So again, and some of the comments, maybe in terms of hearing more specifics with this, but we're working through staff in terms of what the right mix is of sort of perennial establishment of these versus the opportunity for seasonal plantings that could be incorporated into those green areas. The next portion of this is lighting. And again, one of the things that, that I'll repeat here in terms of the overall effect of this is we don't want to create such conspicuous lighting here that it takes away from the great views of the main pylon and the pedestrian bridge lighting. So what we've shown is some low-level lighting that would be tucked underneath these seating elements here. And you can see a couple examples on the left-hand side, how you get this nice glow that comes out from underneath those benches. And we also have a handrail that is lit, which sort of ties into the detailing of the bridge hand railing as you come off here on the north side of the plaza. And you have quite a bit of light that's associated with the building-mounted lights and some of the ambient light that's coming from those. So we're really looking to keep the lighting here fairly subdued and, again, allow the bridge to read through. These show some of the sections through the plaza. Again, you can see it's a fairly level plaza. The pedestrian bridge is to the left, High Street is to the right, and you can see a few people sitting on the precast planters here with some low plant material behind them. And this is the retaining wall, which maintains the grade of the plaza roughly at street grade. And then you see the bridge here, which is suspended as grade drops towards the river. And this is the reverse of that view. So you can see the traffic signal here on High Street to the left. This is the new building that's being developed right now on the west side of the river, the low planter. And in this case, the bridge is in the foreground, so it's not in the cut section, but you can see that retaining wall. And lastly, this is a top view from High Street. So you can see there is a little bit of a gentle grade along High Street as it moves towards Bridge Street here. The buildings that flank the landing on either side, and then you can see a little bit of sense of the planters here. This shows the notion of the retaining wall that we have here. And there are a few details that we're looking at. So this is a limestone that has been quarried locally in Delaware and other areas throughout the county that is used some in historic Dublin as well, and some of the historic structures. And so we're looking at a random rubble pattern for this wall here. It would have sort of a rough-struck mortar point that you see here. And we're looking at some detailing here where we turn corners at the bridge, for example. We'll have some cut stone, which starts to pick up on some of the detailing of the historic Dublin buildings. And as well, we're going to have a base course here that has a little bit larger stone. This shows a little bit of snippet of the railing detail, but I have some larger views of that. So this is a natural limestone product. This is an enlargement that shows an elevation here where the bridge ties in and then a section. So we're continuing the detailing of that railing around as it hits grade and comes onto the landing. So we'll continue both the railing detail and the lighting that's under the railing itself. And you can see a little bit of an enlargement here of that corner detail that we looked at before that's based on sort of the historic Dublin model of the building corner there. And then this shows the section of that retaining wall and the railing at the top. These are a few views of the planters and benches will be in the plaza. These will have joints in them. They won't come in as one piece. They have about an 11-ton max in terms of what they can bring in with the equipment here. But we'll make those joints as seamless as possible so they'll have a continuous shape like you see here. And then these are some views of the plaza itself. So We're looking to the west, up Rock Crest Parkway. High Street is here. You can see the development on either side. This is the bridge railing and retaining wall off to the right, the historic Dublin sidewalk brick, and then the proposed planters and benches here. And these are the bollards in the background. The next view we've flipped, so we're standing just inside the High Street walk. You can see the pedestrian bridge, which we're looking to reveal here in this view. Again, the precast planters and green space in the foreground, bollards and historic brick. We've kind of jumped to the north side of the landing here with the same general view. The pedestrian bridge is tucked just behind the building here in this view. One more view looking to the east with the pedestrian bridge. And then stepping across the street, and this is similar to one of the views that we looked at in the Grounds of Remembrance set of renderings, so you can get a sense of how that sidewalk brick transitions into the plaza here. So we'll open up to questions.
Super, thank you. Can you go back to the overhead view of the plaza area where you show the benches and stuff? Like this. Sorry, whacking my microphone. Yeah, that's fine. So, so can you tell me what's the functional purpose of this space? So what are we intending this space to be, and how do we intend this space to be used?
The primary function of it is really to support the flow of traffic off the pedestrian bridge into historic Dublin here. And among the early debates that we had about this space is how big should it be and what are some of the functions that should happen on it. So, if you think about that space, if we kind of push the buildings further apart and grew the plaza, you might create some more room for additional activities that could be programmed or happen there. You might start to get into some of the sacrifices in terms of how big that is relative to the continuity of the architecture along High Street. So we worked pretty thoroughly through that discussion in the early planning phases. And the notion here is that really the primary function of this is to highlight the bridge, the river corridor, support the movement from the street out there, and provide a few opportunities for seating and just informal use within the body of the plaza. Now, that doesn't mean that it couldn't be programmed for small types of events. They would certainly need to respect whatever sort of ongoing movement would happen during those events across the bridge. But for example, if you had like a charity run walk that ran across the bridge or some small event that was related to the library, I think that could potentially be staged on there. And we've provided power receptacles in each of the planters, in the event that there would be holiday displays or other small events that could happen there.
I guess I think that I think that bench planters are a very cool design, but I think that part of the issue that I have is that I feel like with the size of them, sort of precludes the ability to have any other type of an activity there because it really limits where you could put it. And I get, the way that this is designed is to push foot traffic really through from, one direction to another. The only place that you would be able to do some other type of event where maybe you have a farmer's market or, I don't know, something of that nature, would be off to the sides. But with the seating there, you can't do that. And so I guess I might look towards, is it worthwhile for us to explore removable seating and/or, movable tables? And in that same vein, are those bollards removable? Bollards? I don't know what the word is. Thank you. Yeah, are the bollards removable?
Center bollards have to be removable to allow for.
Can you have him, could he speak into the mic record? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, the center bollards will be removable so that EMS service to the bridge if necessary and regular maintenance is.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. How high are those, the tops of those benches?
It varies some, just from an eyeball perspective. If you're on the back side of this one, it's going to be about this high. If you're on the inside of the plaza, the seating is about 18 inches, and then it has a typical bench height to lean, excuse me, lean against.
Do you have kids? What was how old are your kids?
8, 6, and 4.
What do you think they'll be doing on those? Leaping off the
climb.
top. So I have 5 kids, so like my mind always goes to those things when it comes to those. So again, I think the design of the benches is beautiful. I think it's very cool, and it's sort of very free-flowing, and I like that. I'm just not sure that from a functionality perspective, it would meet with a wide variety of potential programming there, because I guess I always thought that the purpose of the landings wasn't just to usher traffic through, because I don't know how much foot traffic we're really going to have there at any given time. It's really difficult to know, given that this is all new for us, right? And the bridge, the pedestrian bridge is going to be new. So we have no idea what that foot traffic is going to be like. So for the sole purpose of it is to provide some occasional passive seating here and there and to usher traffic through, I guess is missing the mark and missing potential opportunities for programming. So I'll give you sort of an example. My husband and I took our youngest to get ice cream over the weekend to Graders. And they have a cute little seating space outside. And there are some areas where you can sort of sit together and look at each other. We were sort of stuck, it was kind of crowded, so we were stuck on a bench where we had to sit next to each other, and we're sort of twisting to try to talk to each other. It wasn't a great way for us to interact.
Right.
And that you get that same kind of a thing here. So as funny as I was reviewing these over the weekend, I was thinking of sort of that circumstance where, you know, I got my kid flipping around talking to me and my husband with his ice cream in his hand, not really being able to have a good conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
And if the idea is only to usher traffic through, maybe that's fine. But if the idea is to create a space where people are interacting and doing things with each other, I don't know that that quite hits the mark. Does it make sense? And I'm just exploring this. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just what I see when I take a look at these and when I think about how I would use them. And I know that's very me, I-centric, but that's my perspective on the world.
Can I just, real quick, I know that there is a government class here. What time were you guys allowed to leave? About an hour ago. 9? You know what? We're going to take a 2-minute break and you guys can take off. Can we put somebody out there to sign their sheets?
You can bring them up.
Eric. What? They
Bridget,
don't,
how are you, sweetheart?
they don't want to stay?
Nice to see you. I'm sorry, I just now realized you guys were here a lot longer than you
Yes,
did.
I would love to. Where do you want me to sign
Where
it?
do you need me to sign it? Down here?
You guys don't want to stay? Come on.
Tell your mom and dad I said hello. It's nice to see you. Brittany!
You got a life.
I didn't even see you. I just texted Tatum. I'm like, text Brittany. Find out when she's allowed to leave.
She was the one who dropped all the binders in the
Shouldn't have it any other way.
Your first
Minute break is over. Christina, were you done, or did you have more? You are done? Chris?
Okay, I have a couple of comments. I was scaling this off. The documents tell us that the plaza is 7,250 square feet.
I'm sorry?
The documents tell us that the plaza is 7,250 square feet.
Okay.
If I scale off, if 20 scale is accurate, it looks like it will be for this. If I scale off the benches, in the plaza, we have approximately 1,500 square feet of benches, or 21% of the plaza is taken up by bench. I too think that the benches are lovely, but I don't know if we're willing to give up nearly a quarter of all of the space on the plaza for benches that cannot be moved. And while I appreciate your comment of if we had this to do over again, you'd spread the buildings out and you would have, the plaza would be larger and you could actually program activities into it. But I still think there's room for a little art, a little art demonstration, or if this, I still think there's room for some programmable activity out there. But I don't know if we'll have room if 21% of the overall floor space is taken by benches that can't be moved.
Well, let me, those are both good points. I'm going to let Mr. Ehrman talk about programming, because we've had a lot of discussions with staff about how they would envision that back through the basic site plan process.
Yeah, and so a lot of our conversations were around what is this plaza serving? And if you look at, we are on the confluence on all four sides of this with pedestrian bridge. On the north and south flanks, we've got 2 outdoor seating areas for restaurants, and then on the western flank, we've got the Dublin Road. So we are a little bit challenged with the ability for us to put something of significance on this plaza. There is room here for a small type of guitarist or even an art display of some kind. I think we do have that room, and I certainly understand your point about reducing the size of the benches and so forth. But the use of this plaza was discussed in a lot of detail. It was included in the basic site plan that came before each of the bodies. The idea of programming came up in the last conversation with, I believe it was ARB, and I had the conversation with them that, although we don't want to look at the one side of the river versus the other as far as the programming aspects, but when you look at the east side of the river, the design of that plaza space and that parkland, it doesn't have the interruptions of a lot of the other activities that you'll find on this plaza. We are looking at the Eastern Plaza as one of our primary larger event types of programming space, but it doesn't leave us an option here to have a smaller type of event. We've got utilities and things that are being run to these planters, water supply and so forth, just for that same purpose.
I think that you'll have a higher demand on this side of the river with proximity to parking and not being required to cross Riverside Drive, and for all those reasons, I think the demand would be higher in this portion for small functions, very small, small art shows, things of that nature.
And I believe we still have that as an option, but with the concern about the size of the benches, we can certainly take a look at that as well.
Well, between the building, let's see. For example, between the building on the left side here from, I believe it's labeled, oh no, it's different. Is that B, the shape closest to the left side there? On here, it's labeled C. This one right there. I can't read it from here.
This is the
Right here?
Yes, that one. If I scale that off, there is only 7 feet, 6.5 feet from the building to the beginning of that planter. So if someone is sitting there and your knees are out, maybe you can't sit on that side, I don't know. That's a really, we don't like to have our sidewalks more narrow than that, so that 2 people can pass one another comfortably on our multi-use paths and things. So it's creating some really tight spaces in it's a plaza. It is supposed to be, it's not an enclave. I think it needs to be a little bit more open. Those are really narrow spaces.
Why couldn't you bring put some of the benches in, and as we see how it's utilized, if we think there's a need for more later, at least you could add to it, as opposed to trying to put them all in now, or none in now?
You can have irrigation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a thought.
There's only 10 feet from that one over there. I wish I had a laser pointer, but the one in the center, the largest, the fattest of them, on my drawing, if I scale it, there's only 10 feet. It's only a 10-foot wide opening.
But Chris, what that points to is the fact of what Matt said, that this is really a small space. This is a channel entry space. This side of the river, we have flat areas and display areas and a landing area that can service the kind of activities you're talking about, where when you said this is only 6 feet to the planter, you're starting to give us the dimensional understanding of the totality of the space, and it's really a small space. Let me ask you a question. Is there still a bicycle trail on this thing, or did we take that off? I forgot.
Coming across the bridge.
Okay, so what I'd rather see you do is utilize these planters, or whatever you want to do, whether it's stripes in the ground or texture material, so that people don't run into each other. So there's a separation between, and I don't know if this is sort of what this represents, so.
That's precisely the way these are set
The
up.
channeling
so-
of people between pedestrian and
Right.
bicycle, and that makes sense to me, and this design then makes sense to me.
So you can imagine, just to build on what you said, that these were set up so that there's a main flow of traffic here for cyclists and folks coming off the bridge. We have some smaller avenues back here to kind of separate flow, which will be a smaller number of pedestrians, which is why the spaces are narrower.
Right.
But this was exactly set up to create that legible funnel here off the bridge, but then separate a little bit for the ability to have some other traffic.
See, that makes sense to me why you designed it the way you designed it, because if we've got bicyclists and pedestrians, we don't want them meeting. And this is a pretty tight space, so I can understand why you may have designed it. Let me ask you another question. On the handrails, are we running wire? Is that what we're going to do then? Okay, and that's going to be really nice. And then I like the way you zeroed out the grade change between the landing and the street area. Very smart. I know it'd probably save some money to drop the elevation and start putting steps in and everything else, but I think it's really a neat detail, a very important detail. It's like having a patio off your back of your house where you just step out of the house onto the patio instead of dropping down a bunch of steps. So I think it's a really good planning on your part, and I'm sure that's why the retaining wall is so huge.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay for it in rock glued to that piece of concrete to make that thing work. So anyway, so no, I get your design. I don't know if, like Chris and Christina said, if it can be narrower and, save more space, or I just think it's pretty tight for trying to do any kind of real display areas if you're going to have people moving back and forth with two different kind of functions, one on foot and one on bicycle. So, all right.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. I think it makes less sense after that explanation, because if I'm sitting on the edge of that wall with my 2 sons and we're eating ice cream and my husband, we're all there, and someone decides to come through in a bike, and we have, between those 2 sections there, 12 feet, 14 feet, I don't necessarily want a bike coming across a bridge in a transportation matter with me sitting there with an ice cream and be 3 or 4 feet in front of my nose. Or I think it's just making a small space smaller because we're putting a lot of stuff in it. It's kind of like furniture that's too big for a room makes the room feel smaller.
I guess I'm not sure. When I see these renderings, to look at it one-dimensionally from the air is one perception. But when I see this, and then what you said just a minute ago about the fact that we have 2 restaurant patio spaces sort of flanking this space, and, we have our staff talking about programming and sort of what's around this, and then you look across the street at the library, and we have this very large, significant public plaza. So I'm not looking to replicate that here. I think if we're going to do a farmer's market, hopefully it'll be big enough that, you wouldn't put it here, you'd put it in some space that's larger and more appropriate. And this just, when I see this perspective, it doesn't feel tight. And I like the idea of having it's a bench, they're benches, but they're also planters that are going to add life and greenery and, depending on what's in them on a given season, different seasonal decoration. And I'm picturing that area as more of an intimate space versus some of the larger space on the other side of the river and then the plaza across. So for me, this is kind of just right. I don't know.
I think people will be meeting people there at this space, and they'll need a place to sit while they wait for whoever they're going to catch to go across the bridge, or people coming the other way to meet them, or to go to dinner, or to whatever. So I see it as a more of a meeting place, not a programmed place.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think anyone's saying we shouldn't have seating there. I don't think that's what at least I don't think that's what I've heard. And I don't disagree. And as I said, for me, it's about the purpose of the function of the space. If the purpose of the function of the space is to be that funnel to push traffic through for the occasional, meetup or what have you, then I think this potentially serves its purpose. And as I said, I think the benches and the planters are beautiful. I'm not disagreeable to any of that. What I don't want to do is I don't want to have a missed opportunity to provide ourselves the opportunities for that kind of programming, if that's what we desire. If it's not, and it's just a funnel-to-funnel traffic, this probably fits the bill, although I'm a little worried about the bicycle thing. But I feel like that's a collision waiting to happen between a bicyclist and a pedestrian. And maybe not. That's just my concern.
Yeah, I think, with respect to the bicycle concern, the traffic on the bridge will be mixed. And one of the things that we've observed, we've talked about in previous conversations, is that far more, or I shouldn't say far more, I would be willing to bet roughly equal amounts of traffic on the bridge are going to be stopping and looking over the rails as they are moving at high speed. And so I think there's going to be some natural governors on speed cycling coming across the bridge just because of the presence of people that are stopped. And so they probably won't be coming off this west landing at a good clip, would be my suspicion.
Darren, can you flip to L15? That picture looks like there's more space, and just my layman's looking at there looks to me to be more space represented in that picture than there does the overhead at L5. When you look at L5, I think, geez, those are kind of close together. But then when you look at it from this angle, it looks like there's plenty of space to get.
Yeah,
And are those the same dimensions?
They are the same dimensions. These are modeled accurately in 3 dimensions from those plan views.
Darren, I just want to comment. I like the design, and combined with all the opinions that have been shared and Matt's comments regarding the fact that it really wasn't intended to be highly programmed. Yeah, that's not how I envisioned it, given all the other opportunities that we have for programming here, including the library, if we were to do so, in other locations, on the west side of the river. So anyway, I just thought I'd add my 2 cents. Thank you.
The only other thing I would add about those benches is that looks to me like a de facto skate park, so just something to think about.
Even the next 2 images, 16 and 17, it looks, for me, it looks wider, and there especially.
I think Mary Poppins over there, she keeps showing up in the different places. Go back. See her there with her child? On the far left, the white skirt? Yeah. She's been in a couple places.
She loves that plaza.
She does.
Yeah.
She likes the whole area.
Yeah. Spends a lot of time there.
Where's
Okay, that was good.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Sometimes a little levity is needed.
No other comments for the good of the order? All right, I make a motion to approve the site plan with the parking plan with no conditions.
Second.
Ann?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
I'm
Mayor
sorry.
Mayor Peterson?
She's keeping us in suspense. Did she voted yet? Go a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Coombs?
Yes.
Downtown public Downtown parking garage, conditional use downtown Dublin garage. Jen.
Good evening again.
Jeez.
This is the development plan and site plan and conditional use for the downtown Dublin parking garage. So site orientation is in the western portion of the existing library site, west of North High Street and north of North Street. Again, quick overview. So we had the basic plan approved by City Council in April, with Council then being the required reviewing body again for this application. In June, there was a follow-up to Council related to the building materials and the choice and recommendation for the terracotta panels, which have been incorporated as part of this application. And then ART has reviewed this and made a recommendation, which I'm going to go through. And tonight, before council, then there's 3 motions, one for the conditional use, one for the waivers, and one for the development plan and site plan with conditions. So in terms of the site, no major changes, a lot of refinement of details. Parking, 548 parking spaces within the garage, similar pedestrian entrances before on North Street, adjacent to the library, on that east elevation, as well as then on Franklin Street. We have the 2 vehicular entrances, one on level 1 at North Street, and then one on the 2nd level at Franklin Street. The book drop is in the same location, obviously with some refinement and collaboration with the library to make sure that meets their needs, but that's a write-out only. So engineering has weighed in on that and reviewed that to their satisfaction, as well as then the bike hub being shown in the same location on that northern elevation. So in terms of review of this by ART, in terms of waivers and conditions, ART reviewed this thoroughly. There are a series of waivers that are related to the site plan portion, a lot to do with setbacks, lot coverage, the design details in the garage, as well as then number of entrances and landscaping. All of that's detailed within the memo and then analysis that's included with your packet. In terms of conditions of approval then for the development plan and site plan, we have some related to setbacks, 2 related to sort of internal workings of the garage, related to vehicle charging stations and surveillance, looking at further detail of that and making sure that that's included. Site photometrics, some additional details needed as part of the building permit, as well as then tree replacement. If that's not being provided on site, then a fee will be paid in lieu of to make sure that that is correct. And then, as I mentioned, there's a conditional use application for this. The code requires occupied space to be provided along the street frontages, which is not possible based on the design and intent of this garage. So ART, ARB, and Planning Commission have all reviewed this and recommend approval of that portion of this application for the conditional use part of it. In terms of elevations, I just picked a sample image here, but I think this gives a good sense of the materials and design solution that was landed on for the garage. So you can see the terracotta material here on the upper portions, and Miguel from Moody Nolan has a material board, and he's going to go over that in a little more detail about the patterning and the colors, so you can see that and how that fits with these other pieces. You can see the stone then has been incorporated along this wall and along portions of the base of the garage. And then a more sleek architectural concrete then with some glass elements for the stairs or elevators where that's appropriate. Again, given all the detail that's provided on all the elevations, wanting to keep this fairly clean elevation. And then the green screen part of this around the base that runs around the whole perimeter, first level. So we've had a lot of discussions among staff and consultants to make sure we're getting all those pieces right and fit together. And again, a lot of the design and materials lead to a number of waivers as well, related to permitted primary materials and secondary materials, the percentages of those materials and how they're applied, as well as then what we call facade divisions, which are detailed again in your memo. And then the only condition that we had really related to architecture were canopy details. So where there's canopies, making sure that those entrances are clearly marked and match with the elevation and design of the building. And then some additional details related to the heights of retaining walls around the site, making sure that we're within the right thresholds for that, and then making sure that all the plans sort of jive together. So we had some clerical things to clean up too. So conditions for that. So then, as I mentioned, there is 3 motions required. One is approval of the conditional use with no conditions. And then the second is approval of the waivers, which are, I've detailed them out on here on the slides in case you have specific questions about them, but they're outlined in your memo. So in total, there's 22 waivers. And then the third motion is for approval of the development plan and site plan with 8 conditions. So I'm going to turn it over to Miguel if he wants to go through some of the material details, just to make sure everybody understands those changes.
Some additional materials.
I already went through it for you, Mike. You don't have to do it. Oh, yeah. Where'd he go? Gonna be the most expensive parking garage in the state of Ohio. Here you go. That'll change your mind.
So I'd like to briefly kind of walk you through some of the updates that we've made since last time we spoke. A lot of it has to do with detailing, additional detailing of a lot of these materials. For example, on the concrete, we developed a pattern for the architectural concrete at the stairs, as well as detailing for the terracotta and trying to finalize the terracotta kind of arrangement throughout the facades and the color distribution. So it's a little hard to see, but I hope the elevations give you a little bit of clarity with the concrete, for example, the patterning. And we'll get to 3D images here soon. The south elevation. So the color on the terracotta is meant to be in a tight range, and that's by design. We want it to look natural, and we want it to kind of flow and be subtle. So the lightest color really corresponds to the metal color that's being used on the library. And then from there, we have a kind of a middle tone and a darker tone. But again, they're in a very tight range, so it's a very natural-looking kind of arrangement.
Excuse me, can you pull the microphone down a little bit? It doesn't seem to be picking up.
Is that better?
I think so. Thank you.
The other thing that we did, which I'm not sure you had seen the last time we were here, was the top of the green screen you've detailed so that we actually have a reveal at the top between the green screen and the terracotta, so that we
satisfy a few different requirements. One is maintenance from the city side, and the other was keeping our open air requirements for the garage, since it's naturally ventilated. Here's showing with the more fully kind of realized site. And then on the north side, again, a lot of the detailing of the concrete, how the stone works with the concrete wall. We've kept that stone kind of as the first floor, top of the first floor marker, in this case, the second floor. So it's really a story high, give or take, which is where really it's the most visible and tactile and so on. It really has the most kind of powerful presence at that level. And then the cleaner character of the concrete above that. We've done a little more work too on the perforated panel guardrail. So that's detailed as well in the elevations. It's kind of a slot detail that we have instead of just a kind of a hole pattern. So it gives it a more elongated character that goes with the terracotta pattern. And here we have kind of a blow-up of the different panel sizes. We have 3 sizes. One is full, which runs from the bottom of the second floor to the top of the 4th floor crash rail. We have a medium size, and we have a smaller size, which both happen on the north and the west facades. So this kind of details the distribution of the terracotta itself as a pattern, but also the color. So each one is coded for its profile. You can see I guess the profiles got cut off on these sheets, but there's 2 different profiles. We're using the 2x2, which is what you have in hand, and then we have a 2x4, which is actually applied vertically and then horizontally to give it a little more texture. So this kind of goes through the distribution of the panels and the colors as well. And you can see that the darker color is really distributed very minimally throughout. You want it to really maintain that more natural character again and a lighter kind of a characteristic to it. And this is a little more abstractly looking at that east facade facing the library, kind of giving you a better idea of, visually what the pattern is doing. The only other update I think we'd like to really touch on briefly here, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions, is we've also addressed some of the city comments regarding plantings on the green screen. So we've actually changed some of the species. We now have English ivy, Boston ivy, and the clematis, which is a flowering ivy. So there's a nice kind of a mix. And I think the intent, and Franco, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the intent is that the English ivy is going to take a longer time period to establish itself, and the other 2 are going to fill in a little more rapidly. So it'll be a mix of the 3. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have one. When we look at these parking garages, no matter how cool they are on the outside, at night, turn the lights on, and they're the ugliest things in the world. And I've heard that, oh no, we're hiding the lights behind the beams of the garage. And I just want to verify that somehow we are screening or not having those fixtures that hang down. And if we have like a flush mount, I don't know how you do it in a concrete structure, but so many of the parking garages that I've seen are just absolutely horrific because of, and only because of the lighting. And I know that you have to have lighting in there, but we got to do better, so.
Absolutely. So this is the sort of typical fixture that you'll find inside the garage on the ceiling, and it is a flush mount. It will be mounted above the line of the beams, so it'll be visually hidden from the outside. And the lighting is meant to be dimmable. as well, so we can control the levels of light, which I think there's been some discussion on that as well, and concerns on the light levels. So we have both, hopefully, we've addressed both of those questions.
Need to teach our friends across the river how to do that.
I've got a few questions about salt tolerance of the plant material you selected. We tend to put a lot of salt down on our brick sidewalks in historic Dublin. As you can imagine, brick can be a little bit more difficult to remove snow and ice from than concrete. What, in your opinion, what is the salt tolerance? It looks like some of these drawings, if I scale them off, you're 12 to 18 inches off of the edge of the sidewalk?
And we're talking about the, which material in particular?
The green screens.
Oh, the green screen. These are going to be fairly close to, but they have a bed of, mulch and underneath them. So we do have a buffer zone between the green screen and the actual sidewalk.
And how far is that? In some places, it looked like it was maybe 12 to 15 inches.
I'll let my colleague Franco.
Franco Mano with the MH&T. So at its closest point, we're about 18 inches away. Majority of the time, it's on the order of around 5 feet from the sidewalk to the green screen, but there's a pinch point, I believe it's at the southeast corner of the garage, where we're, like I said, with 18 inches or so.
And what do you feel like the salt tolerance is of the English ivy and the Boston ivy and the clematis?
Well, I think that it's a little hard to tell, to be honest with you. I think if we're, with the English ivy, any kind of chemicals that get onto it with it being evergreen, there's potential for foliar damage, I think, during the
I'm just wondering if, some retaining wall, that isn't, not retaining wall, that's an exaggeration, but some retaining material, even like the granite curb material or something that would, in those tight areas, that would differentiate the two. I don't think we'll have much luck at survivability if we don't separate them somehow.
Some sort of upturn, a curb perhaps,
Right.
something like that, to try to get a little separation there.
Yeah.
I think if the concern is kind of overspray of the de-icing material, then we'll probably still be a little limited with the curb. I think we're still going to be jumping the curb with that. All the system is going to be irrigated, so come springtime, try to flush a lot of the salts and de-icing chemicals out of the soil. I don't know if Sean or anyone has any from staff has any ideas on that. Feel free to pipe.
What do you anticipate the maintenance requirement will be while these vines are growing through there of weaving in and out of the screen?
So at first, they'll be set in by the landscaper. We want to get them of a decent size that they could be staked up against the screen, so they'll be set there, and then begin to take off from that point. So we have mulch at the bottom. There's going to need to be some weeding and maintenance of the irrigation system at the bottom. As far as manually weaving them onto the screen, I think with the English ivy, I don't know that we're going to be looking at too much manual weaving with that. I think that will do its own thing. The clematis, that's probably maybe a little more intensive, just making sure that within that first year that it gets up to where it needs to, and then kind of let it do its thing after that. The English ivy, or the Boston ivy, I think is going to be the same as the English ivy. It's kind of going to go where it wants to. I think once it's on there. I think one of the interesting things that will happen, I think, is the interaction between three ivies. There are really only two ivies on a facade. So the majority of it, the backbone of everything is the English ivy. On the north facade is the Boston ivy mixed in with that. And then on the east, south, and west facades then is the clematis. So on each facade, you only have two ivies. And then how they interact, I think, will kind of be an interesting thing for all of us to watch, to be honest with you, and see how those blend together.
So you're actually going to plant all three plants in the same area?
Intermingled.
So
On each facade, there will be only two plants.
Okay.
There are three.
So you're using the Boston ivies because they climb real quick, but they're deciduous and very unattractive in the winter. But how this works is then the English ivy climbs up on the structure of the Boston ivy.
Yeah.
And helps use it as a climbing device.
Yeah. The Boston ivy we're only using on the north facade, which is one of the smaller facades. And that's primarily for shade tolerance there.
Okay.
My next question is about the starter course. So I've seen, these synthetic materials that they thought would be durable break down in winter applications. You see it at Easton, you see it everywhere. And so it looks like you've come up with this Adair limestone starter course that is supposed to be a more durable material.
Yes, and we've used that in various projects in the past.
What we don't have is the dimensions of the starter course, and the reason that I bring it up is with the change of grades that happen from place to place, I want to ensure that we have at least, I think it takes at least 10 inches of starter course in height. And I see the applications that you have indicated it here, and they're all level. So
That will be detailed as we move through construction documents, and we'll have further detail.
you'll make certain that you have at least 10 inches of a reveal of a starter course at all.
Yes, and very fortunately, because the Adair is actually, unfortunately, only comes in 2 different finishes. In this case, it actually works really well with the ledgestone, with that particular color.
What are the
finish.
dimensions of it? Does it come in multiple dimensions, or?
That's something I'd have to get back to you with.
It's okay. It was more curiosity than anything.
I think it does come in multiple dimensions, and a good example is the retaining wall at the hotel. So if you look at the bottom of that wall, you can sort of see the pattern and dimensionality. Thank you.
Okay, so we're kind of dealing with all 3 of these things. Tim, did you have something?
Just told him, nice work.
Okay. So we're dealing with all 3 of these. Do we want to, I'm just going to make a motion that we approve the conditional use with no conditions.
I will. So moved.
Ann?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Which one are we voting
Just the
on right
first
now?
one, the conditional use.
Conditional.
Can you tell me the case number?
It's all the same number.
It's all the same number, that's why I was doing it in 3 like chunks.
Yep.
It's the
Just
conditional
3
use
separate motions.
with no conditions. Then we're going to get to the thing with all the waivers. That'll be the second one. So the first one is just the
The
conditional.
final plat will be completely separate then?
Correct.
Yes, that's a separate
Okay,
application.
that's what had me confused.
Yes.
No.
Sorry. Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Leckleyder?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Okay, then does anybody have any additional comment or anything they want to say about the waivers for the final development plan and site plan? Then I make a motion that we approve the waivers as listed in the staff report. Is there a second?
Second.
Ann?
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
No.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Leckleyder?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
No.
Mr. Keenan?
Okay, and then final is the final development plan and site plan with 8 conditions. Is there any other comment anyone would like to make?
Wait. The site plan we already voted on, right? That was the plat. We have the plat left.
That's a whole separate application
That's
after
next.
this. I have a whole separate presentation for that.
I got my paperwork backwards.
Okay, so we voted already on the conditional use, and then we voted to approve the waivers in the staff report. And now we are voting on the final development plan and site plan with 8 conditions.
Yes.
Anybody want to make any comment about that one? I make a motion that we approve the final development plan and site plan with the 8 conditions as outlined in the staff report.
Second.
Second.
Ann?
Mr. Leckleyder?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reiner?
Yes.
And Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Okay, and then we have one more, Jen, to do?
Yes.